The following is a conversation I had together with Chana Rosenzweig. I've never actually met Chana, but around a year ago we began a correspondence online in regard to a post she had made questioning whether or not free will exists. We discussed that as well as other topics in this podcast, and hopefully we'll have the ability to record several more as I feel like there's so much more to discuss. So without further ado, here's my discussion with Chana.
It's interesting because I haven't listened to rabbi podcasts or like rabbis speaking in a long time. Lately it's been more like, Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens or things like that. But
It's funny because I just listened to a debate, Hitchens and Boter.
Okay. I started listening to that. I didn't finish it yet though, but
one of those. There's a bunch of them. I couldn't. The second Boter got on, I just skipped to the next Hitchens part. It was so bad. I was like, oh my god, is this what we have defending Judaism? Honestly, I'm ashamed.
So yeah, I'm kind of like
I was appalled. It was so bad. I was like turning colors. Like I'm sitting in my room, at home, and I was like, oh my god, like this mother.
I didn't fully listen to it, and it's been a couple weeks since I started listening to it, so I'm not sure, but
You know which one? Because there's a few of them.
there was one at like the 92nd Street Y or something.
92nd Street Y.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
yeah, so that was the one I started listening to, but honestly, I don't even know if I got past their opening statements, but I was kind of looking last night because I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about the universe, kind of stressing me out. But anyway, so I was looking for debates between atheists or people like I don't know, Richard Dawkins and rabbis.
Sam Harris.
So there was a couple I found. I didn't listen to them, but I started what I had really started listening to before, and then I turned to YouTube. Was I was listening to this rabbi. Okay, so my friend sent it to me recently. I guess she's attempting to convert me back to, I don't know, the way I was before. I'm not really sure, but anyway, he is doing this series, this rabbi, called "Let's Be Real with God" or something along those lines.
Okay, do you know his name?
His name is his last name is Rabbi Sperling, and his first name was I don't remember,
familiar.
but it's on Torah Anytime. He's at least he sounds pretty yeshivish, and his talk is yeshivish, which I'm not very used to, coming from my Chabad background. But what was interesting, kind of just in listening to him speak. So I'm only up to his second. They're 30 minutes or 20 minutes each. Is that it's there's two parts. First of all, that I don't it's interesting, and I feel like he's making somewhat of good points. Nothing that I haven't really heard before. There's nothing crazy. I feel like they're the usual typical argument. He's attempting to prove that God exists, whatever that means. But he never really gets to what is actually
what is that?
God.
What do you mean, whatever that means? Right. That's
well, because he doesn't define what God is.
You've seen the Sam Harris. Yeah, you've seen the Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, one of their first debates, and they just get off on what is truth, and they just lose. They just spend an hour trying to figure out what is truth. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I didn't. I don't think I've actually listened to that, but I did just listen to. There was just a recent discussion with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, and they did refer to that. So that's my only.
Yeah. Problem with when Jordan Peterson debates Sam Harris about God is that Sam Harris is using a very base level understanding and definition of God, and he's saying this base definition of God, this rabbi in the sky with a long white beard, doesn't exist. And Jordan is just obviously that doesn't exist, but that's not my understanding of God. So he's saying I have a whole different understanding of something that does exist, and Sam Harris is but that's not anyone else's perception of God. So you're doing everyone a disservice by saying God exists when you're not talking about this level of God. Because when everyone says God exists, they're talking about this base level. So the question is that fair or not? Is that intelligent or not? That, to me, that's really the debate between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, and they just never get there.
Right. But I mean, I think Sam Harris really has a point, because when I was listening
I
to
agree,
this,
but so does Jordan.
yeah, of course yes, they both have points.
We all agree this God doesn't. I think that anyone who thinks doesn't think that this God exists.
Okay, so then I feel like a lot of people just aren't thinking, because if you want to interpret that, because even when I listen to this rabbi or other people speak about it, people that are strong believers, they're not. There's the way that they talk about God, like this rabbi didn't actually define God, so I'm just like waiting for him to like kind of say like what is God, like, and he doesn't actually say it. He kind of is just making arguments for God, you know, but it's kind of just yeah, he kind of like he implies certain things about God, like at least so far, like at least that there's like this, you know, all powerful God, or like one that like kind of takes an active interest in your life, which I like, I don't know.
Agav, by the way,
yeah.
I have a friend here in Israel, Misplaced, who told me he still remembers when his father came home. His father looks like the very traditional, like yeshivish, you know, like hat and jacket and long beard. He has a yeshiva in like I think Newark or something. He's a Rosh Yeshiva, his father. But he still said he remembers when his father came home and he's like, "Yo, hashgacha pratis is a das yachid." Like the idea of God taking a personal interest and like active role in an individual's life is actually only one person's opinion, like one rabbi's opinion. A lot of rabbis say there's no such thing. God doesn't do that.
Interesting.
It's not the way God works. God takes a role in humanity as a whole, in the world as a whole. As far as your day-to-day, God doesn't give a shit. There is that opinion. I'm not saying. Yeah.
Right, because
it's just funny, because usually we assume if that opinion is true, in other words, if God's not taking an active role, then there's no God.
Right.
Right? Because a lot of people like,
yeah.
How can God let this happen to me? And the answer might just be like, who are you? No offense. No, like.
Well, I feel like it's a little bit of a paradox, because if God is like all powerful, then shouldn't he be taking an interest in your life as well? Even though you don't. But then also, if he's all powerful, then why does he care?
You're anthropomorphizing God.
Right.
You're saying it's like a he, and like looking around. God is like this overall idea, especially in the Kabbalah, where God created a system.
Yeah.
In the Kabbalah, there's the Ein Sof. There's the infinite, and God would be like that infinity, whatever that even means. And then that infinite created like a system that functions and works on its own.
Yeah.
And we interact with that system. So generally, all our problems are caused at like bad interactions. In other words, if I say the wrong thing, then someone's gonna throw something at me, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be actions have consequences. That's the way to say it. That's like the spiritual. Literally, it's karma.
Okay. Like there's like a
Kabbalah
cause
works with karma. Like
yeah,
there's a cause and effect, and like leave God out of this. There's a bad effect because there was a bad cause. That's why.
Right.
This is Mishlei, by the way. This is Shlomo HaMelech. That was his perception of God. Like I walked by the field of the lazy man, and it was thorns and thistles because he's lazy. What does God have to do with this?
Right. Good point.
That's it. Like you reap what you sow. You know, if what you sow is nothing, then you reap nothing. If what you sow is horrible, then you reap. Right.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there are exceptions to that rule, and that's the idea of like, why do bad things happen to good people? There are exceptions. In other words, there are times when we don't get out what we put in, and that's like a question as to like how that works, why that works. Why that happens, and like, okay, that's a good discussion. There is a point at which there's a discussion in which we don't really understand on a certain level. And I think that's in reality as well. Generally, if you're looking to make money, you work. You go get a job. The better you handle it. Now, there are people who have perfect job, they work, this, that, and then something goes wrong, and someone swindles them, they get robbed, and it just doesn't work out in the end. But that doesn't mean that the theory is not correct. I used to think of it more as like weight loss. Like we all know how to lose weight and how to gain weight. Now there are people who are born with faster metabolisms, people who are born with slower metabolisms, and there are people who it doesn't work for. And there are people who can get stronger, and there are people who can't. But like the overall idea of you eat less, work out more, you'll lose weight. I think that we all kind of agree to that on some level.
Like it works for most people, and there's exceptions to the rule.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean we throw the concept out. When we find someone who it's like, oh, he's working out, he's not getting, he's not getting more muscular, we don't say, oh, the whole thing's garbage, right?
Yeah.
So there are exceptions in which people, bad things happen to good people, but we don't say the whole system no longer exists. We say there are some times where there's like a kink in the system, and even though you're going through all the motions, it's not working out for you.
Yeah. It's interesting. Because I feel like that's actually the root of a lot of problems that people have, is that they're not, or not that they have, but people's understanding of things is that they often don't, is that they look at the exception to the rule, not the rule itself. And then that's where we end up in like either like logic traps or like misunderstandings or things that are like not actually true, I guess. I don't know. But it was also interesting we were saying before, because about anthropomorphizing God is because last night when I couldn't sleep, at like 3 a.m, I started to like write, or actually I didn't write, I was texting, like not like typing on my phone. But I feel like it's a little different. Like sometimes like writing is better. I don't know. But I was just like, I'm sure it stresses a lot of people out. It was especially stressing me out last night. Like, where did the universe come from? And like, if the Big Bang is like real, then like what was like, which to me seems more plausible these days than like creation, but then, or maybe it is creation, I don't know, but just it's like, okay, but like what was,
I mean, in Kabbalah it is creation. The Big Bang was actually theorized by a Christian priest, if I'm not mistaken. Are you aware of that?
No, I didn't read up on it, but I did see that there was,
I have to double check that, but I'm fairly certain in this debate between Hitchens and
they like brought that up.
I think the one between Hitchens and Botter, Hitchens talks about how it's really the method and not the conclusion. He doesn't like the dogmatic method of religion, where it's like accept it because I say so. And he says that the person who actually theorized the Big Bang was like a Christian priest, and the Pope or something said like, if you tell me this is how it went down, I'll turn this into like Christian dogma. Like, if this is like your scientific take of like this, then this will be the Christian take, and I'll just make it Christian and canonize it and call it a day. And he was like, Hitchens was like, that's the problem. Like, you shouldn't be there shouldn't be a dogmatic take on anything. Like, this is the current theory, and like, let it advance.
And there are some alternate theories that like seem to have some sort of basis. I don't completely understand it because like this whole physics astronomy thing is not really my thing, but sometimes what
we're gonna also get back to the simulation theory problem.
Tell me what that is.
I just came up in my YouTube feed, someone asking Elon Musk if we create like this sentient, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but like if we create AI and this and that, like what would be your first question to this like absolute, consciousness, like intellect, otherworldly intellect? And he like stops and he thinks and he's like, if I can ask one question, what's beyond the simulation? It's like,
interesting.
Okay. If you go, the funny part is if you go with simulation theory, then 1,000% everything could have just been popped out of nowhere on a certain level.
Right.
Now, on a certain level, maybe not, because obviously there's the beginning of the code, right? So I guess in theory that would be like that would manifest as like the Big Bang.
But even if I'm not really still so clear on what the simulation theory is, but even if the simulation theory is, let's say, true, then
you've watched The Matrix, right?
I watched the first one. Is it not then part? Is that whatever's outside of the simulation? Is that not also technically part of the universe?
It depends what you mean by the word universe. I don't have an answer for that.
Like not all existing things, like matter.
Not to
or I don't
us.
know. Is it not?
Not to us, not really. The people outside of the Matrix to the people inside the Matrix, they don't really exist. Do they?
Like they kind of follow a different set of rules. Is that what you're getting at, or?
Well, they just live in a whole different a whole different reality. I don't know. The rules, the rules are part of that. Yeah, but
Like, let's say, like, in this reality, like, you know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but maybe there, a squared plus b squared equals d squared.
that's true. But to me, that's kind of irrelevant. If this whole universe right now is somebody's snow globe sitting on their desk in their office, okay, and we're their little hobby in between work, right?
Right.
Let's imagine that for a second. Now let's imagine that they modeled this snow globe precisely after their own world, right? And we're like the microcosm of the macrocosm that is their universe. Okay, everything's the same, laws of physics, like the whole thing is the same. Just we are their snow globe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I think is the
To
way
me,
that some people define God. Yes.
To me, that would still be an insane trip, regardless of whether we have the same laws of physics. Like, to me, that would still be crazy. It would be like, what? We're someone's snow globe? Now, on a certain level, I think Kabbalah believes this. Not necessarily with the snow globe, but that's my understanding of spirituality in general. Kabbalah and spirituality of messing with like performing miracles and messing with the system. It's kind of like an understanding of the fact that, like, there's this, like, code behind the whole system, very similar, I think, to the Matrix. I think the Matrix was based off of, you know, very deep Kabbalistic and spiritual concepts. They actually, I don't know if I told you, they show the Matrix in Eish Torah in Jerusalem as part. They have like a Matrix shear.
Oh, interesting. What's the like setup? Like, how does it go?
I've never taken the class, but that's what I've been told by my friends who studied there. They go through it and then they explain, like, this is like the Jewish belief.
Interesting. Well, it is somewhat, right? Like, this world isn't like even just, I don't know, traditional or, I don't know, Kabbalistic Jewish thought, right? Like, this isn't like, this world kind of is nothing, right? It's like Hevel, and, you know, all kind of all kind of.
I thought you were Hasidic, not, you know.
Well, it is still an idea, right? Oh, but then there's like the whole Chabad idea of Dir B'Tachtonim.
Dir B'Tachtonim, right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
But they still, they believe in that. They still agree with it. Just the question is, where's the importance lie, right? Like, they still believe that this world would be like a matrix and there's this greater world of, you know, thought, of souls, of whatever, right? But the most important spot is, like, here in, you know, in this world on a certain level.
Yeah, because I guess we don't, even though, like, things seem like a certain way on, like, on a superficial level, right? Like, there's like a whole, like, deeper thing, like, you know, by you, I don't know, picking up the cup of water and saying a bracha on it, you're elevating the soul of the cup or something.
Yeah, mainly I don't believe in any of that stuff. I believe in it all in theory, and I don't believe in almost any of it in practice. Because in my opinion, you have to live on your own perception of reality, and you only get to affect things within your perception of reality to a large extent.
Okay, but regardless of whether,
in other words,
like either it is or it isn't, no? Like, why does it matter how?
No, it is, because that's what you're affecting, and that's what you are creating tikkunim and kilkulim in your world.
Can you define that?
Let's say on rectifications and breaks, shall we say, in like the Kabbalistic sense. But let's say you do, you know, the wrong thing for the right reasons, or vice versa, the right thing for the wrong reasons. Right?
Okay.
So you do the wrong thing for the right reasons. In the world of action, you did the wrong thing. Right? And that creates a problem. That creates a kilkul, that damages, right? That's going to damage something because what you did was wrong. But in the world of reason, what you did was right. What you reasoned was right. Not what you did. What you reasoned was right. So in the world of reason, you created a tikkun. You fixed something. And this is like the Kabbalistic idea of like the different olamot, the different like worlds. Right? So this is like the question I had to deal with when I like discovered spirituality, of like, someone who screams Allahu Akbar and then blows himself up, like what happens? Like to him he's dying al Kiddush Hashem. Like to him he thinks he's like, in the name of God, I'm willing to sacrifice my life. Like that's the ultimate sacrifice. That's amazing from like a spiritual religious perspective. But at the end of the day he's killing a bunch of innocents. Is what he did holy, or is what he or not? Like what do you do with that?
It's misplaced. I think
it's definitely misplaced. The question is like, now what happens to him? Now he dies and goes to heaven. Like now what? Like what? How does that?
Isn't there like 70 virgins or something?
That's what he thinks. Yeah, I don't think you're rewarded for killing innocent children. On both sides. I don't think any. I think children are children, and children don't really have their own beliefs. And I don't think anyone should generally be killed. Like even in old school like wars, usually they left the women and children. Like they didn't. Like thousands of years ago when they were fighting, they understood like these are children. Like what are we like? Huh? I have nothing against them. My axe to grind is with the adults in the room, not with the children.
Or the women.
No, like what?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's I guess like a
But that's a complicated
kind of like
that's a complicated like thing to address. It's like very, it's a scary thing to think about in general. And that's going to also depend on like when he dies, like what is the afterlife? Is the afterlife subjective or objective and stuff like that, which is really, really complicated. But I'm just saying on a simple level, before we get into what's going to happen with him, I think it's beautiful that he's sacrificing his life for the Lord. And I think it's horrible that he's killing innocent children. I can hold both of those ideas in my head at the same time.
Why though? Because
why not?
Because
he's willing to make a sacrifice for what he perceives to be the ultimate truth. I think that's magnificent. I just think he was also off on the ultimate truth.
Yeah, so then why does it matter what he thought if it's completely misplaced? As in, like, why is that beautiful? It's really not beautiful.
This happens in your life all the time. People think they're helping you and they're not. Do you give them any credit for thinking that they were doing what's helping you, or you don't give them any credit? You're like, screw you, you ended up not helping, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay,
but
there
they're
you
also
go.
Not like,
so does God.
They're probably not really no, but they're probably not really hurting or doing the opposite of like what I actually value or what I actually think is important, as opposed to like this guy. He's like, actually, I think actually, I don't even know if this is true because I don't know. But
so
like,
again, I've taken it to an extreme.
Yeah, but just in general, this like
I'm agreeing that what he did was wrong. I'm not disagreeing that what he did was wrong. I'm agreeing what he did was wrong. Now I'm saying what he thinks that what he did was right, and I value that. Why shouldn't I value it? Or he might not think what he did was right. He might have just been bored, or he might have just been angry. In which case, it's a different person. But I can theorize potentially that he thinks what he did is right, and I respect that.
He needs to
I
have
respect
better
someone who has something that they're.
He just has to have better communication in his relationships. Like he needs to talk to God and figure out what he actually wants.
I would agree with that too. I'm not saying there wasn't a flaw here, and I'm not saying that he won't have to own up to that, right? In other words, very often when someone does something for you that was counterproductive, and they thought they were helping you, your reply might be, next time ask me first, right?
Yeah.
But there's still some grain of credit that they get for like thinking they were helping you. If they really thought they were just screwing you over, you'd cut them out of your life in a second, no?
Right. Probably. Or maybe not.
Like if you like, No, whatever, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
but like,
yeah,
if you
yeah.
thought, if you thought that they were just, out to get you, it would be a whole different conversation than I thought I was helping you.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. So therefore, because this person thinks that he's doing the right thing, even though he's not, because he's attempting to sacrifice his life for God, which I don't even know if sacrificing your life for God in the first place is the right thing to do. But let's say it is. Then, okay.
I don't think it's meant to be literal. I have like the, but yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's even meant to be figurative. And then, okay, so then therefore he kind of had the right idea, just the wrong actions.
I mean, in a certain level, the idea was also, become a whatever he did, a suicide bomber, let's say, like, that was also part of the idea. He had the wrong idea also. He had the right motivation, maybe, or the right belief.
So,
The belief, the hierarchy of values, I would say, like, he kind of got right. Like, he put his beliefs and his truth, he put his truth above the well-being of others.
and for your highest value, that's what you should do.
And he ignored society, because society generally tells you not to do things like that. On a certain level, I might value that kind of hierarchy of values, but I think he had the wrong values in his hierarchy. Linked to his hierarchy, in other words. In other words, he had a false god, is the way we would say it. To put God, most of us put people before God. Let's imagine for a second. Right? Now, in a way, you can say if we do that, then Jordan Peterson, based on Carl Jung, would probably say that people are our God.
Okay.
Like, society is generally our God. Society is our pinnacle of, like, perfection, what we should do, how we live our life. We're looking at what other people are going to say. That's generally dictating our actions to a large extent. Now, he separated society, and he moved society down a rung, and he put this idea of truth above society. But he's just got a warped perception of truth. Right.
I don't know. I'm just thinking about it.
And now let's try to go back, because I like totally got sidetracked with that. The idea of like living your life based on your own perception of reality and what you can create and what you can't. Like on a certain level, everyone in their spot has a certain level of like sway. Imagine there's like an army, right? Because just trying to find some, or or government or whatever it is, and there's the the simple soldiers, and then there's the lieutenant, the general, right? If they attack, and it's this bad strategy that was implemented, and they lose the battle, right? You're not gonna get the soldier in trouble for their bad strategy. You're gonna yell at the general.
Yeah.
Now, if the strategy was not implemented correctly, if the soldiers weren't listening to the general, then you yell at the soldiers, right? But the person who's not thinking, who's not behind the strategy, doesn't get in trouble for the bad strategy. So like if you're not thinking and you're just doing things, you haven't caused any like damage or whatever in as far as the thinking like there was no incorrect thought. There was just no thought. You weren't the one thinking. Who was thinking? Your parents were. Your rabbi was. Right? Your rabbi told you what to do. Your rabbi tells you go ahead and get married to a specific guy. Okay? And it was not a good shidduch. Okay?
Yeah.
And in 3 years you get divorced. You got divorced because it wasn't a good shidduch. Right? But on a certain level, you can go back to the rabbi and yell at him. I'm okay with that. This was his idea. This was never your idea. You didn't know what was going on. You didn't know what you wanted. You dated him 3 times, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
he was the thought process behind this whole thing. Now, do you have to suffer the consequences for taking actions of which you did not think? Yes. You're the one who's getting divorced in this theory. I hope you don't get divorced, you know.
Thanks.
Yeah. But I mean, unless you need to, in which case, like, you know, good riddance. I was over the summer. I was traveling with a friend of mine, and we're on an elevator in Nashville, and there's a whole bunch of girls like pack onto this elevator, and I turned to one of the girls. I'm like, "Oh, you know, bachelorette party, right?" And she's like, "No, actually, like, my friend over here is getting divorced."
Interesting.
And I turned to her, and I obviously it was like this weird tension, and so I'm just like, when you know, you know.
That's funny.
Congrats.
The elevator conversations are always the best. I was also in Nashville this
Congratulations,
summer.
When you know, you know.
That's funny.
Oh, nice. I loved it.
Yeah, Nashville's a nice place.
So yeah, I think for people who aren't really thinking, they're just not in the world of thought, and like their thoughts just don't, like, there are no thoughts, there's nothing to happen, like, so on a certain level, like the very physical level of like, you know, just drinking something or whatever, like it doesn't, I drank it, I didn't do any crazy like Kabbalistic whatever, right? Now to say something over, a blessing over it, now I said the words, but do I even know what the words mean? Is that the idea? Just say words? Like, who? Only religion could come up with something so asinine that, like, words have value without any meaning or understanding of them. Because we all know in the world that that's not true.
Right.
We all know, like, no one ever understood life like that. If you don't understand what you did and you say thank you and you don't understand what I did for you, like, I don't value your thanks whatsoever.
Right. It's funny because I feel like it's also just a very Jewish idea, I guess, like just like saying words. Like that's what I was always taught, right? Like you just daven and like doesn't really matter if you know. And then like I was talking last week or 2 weeks ago to like one Catholic person and one ex-Catholic person. But they were kind of just talking about what it means to be a modern Catholic, which I'm not really, you know, so familiar with. You know, I guess like the same way probably people are just like, oh, they kind of
modern Catholicism.
Like, you know, people group like all Jews together. They're like, oh, you know, like Chabad, Litvish, but there's like so much nuance. I'm sure there's a lot of nuance in different forms of Christianity, but I'm not really so familiar with it. But they were just saying, yeah, like what makes, you know, what makes a Catholic more modern, I guess, is like one aspect of it, I guess, is like the way what language they use during Mass, like Latin or English, I guess. But it was interesting because she was like, oh, but I don't understand Latin. And he was like, well, you know, I don't know, it's not that much, like learn it or something. And then I kind of just piped in and I was like, in Judaism, like it doesn't even matter if you know what it means or it doesn't. We're just like, say it.
1,000% matters.
I don't know. I feel like we were always
matters.
taught, like, even if you don't understand, like it's okay. Like there's power just in saying the Hebrew words, like regardless of whether or not you understand.
That was a cop-out. That was a cop-out because people stopped knowing Hebrew. Everyone throughout history knew what these words meant. Everyone knew what they always knew what they meant. And by the way, the funniest thing about this whole Latin Christian conversation is if you read through the New Testament, this was one of Jesus's trips, is that like you all are praying, you don't know what you're saying, you're not talking to God, you don't even know what concept of God is, and he's like, just use your own words and just connect to God, which incidentally is also what Rabbi Nachman of Breslov taught. Okay, Jesus was just the first Rebbe, as far as I'm concerned, and like the rabbis were a bunch of misnagdim, you know, for good reason. For good reason. But so literally, the old message of Jesus was speak your mother language, like just speak your mother language, which at that point was Latin. So what happened? They canonized the Latin. Right. And they lost the message because now no one speaks Latin anymore. It's like so comical to me.
Yeah. All right.
But like he was just saying, like the idea of connecting to God is personal, and if you don't know what you're saying, then there's no connection going on here. You don't even know what you're saying. Like what? Yeah.
Maybe you should try to petition the Catholic Church to. You could be like the new Jesus, and you can, you know, make it English now.
Nice. I gave up on the Catholic Church already a long time ago, you know?
Okay. Start your own religion.
But I was just when I was traveling recently, so I was actually talking to a bunch of Christians. We were hanging out together. I had a bunch of like deep like Bible conversations and stuff. But one of the things we were talking about Judaism, and I was talking about how, you know, corrupted it is, in my opinion, from what it originally was like intended to be. And I was just explaining to them, like with Christianity, I'm like, imagine right now we were, you know, a couple hundred years back in the time of the Spanish Inquisition, because we were actually in Spain, right? I was in, I was in Madrid, so I was like imagine we're in, like, I think we can all agree this is not what Jesus meant, right? But this is literally the church, like, imposing these rules and killing people for faith. Like, that was never what Jesus intended. Like, it doesn't take a genius to look around at certain parts of history, and certain ideas, certain concepts, and be like, that was never the intention.
That doesn't seem to be in line with
but generally when we're standing...
No, it just doesn't seem to be in line with the don't do unto others.
With the original teaching.
Yeah,
yeah, not even remotely. But I don't think Judaism is in line either. But it's much easier for us to look at a different religion or a different time in history and say about them they weren't in line. Now when we zoom out, we could say about ourselves, hopefully, which is part of like meditation, that we're not in line either.
How do we get in line?
Yeah, well, you understand the concepts instead of the way they're implemented. That's really the way Carl Jung puts it, on a certain level of people were more concerned about maintaining their institutions than understanding the depth of symbolism. I can give you the exact quote if you want. I have it. I actually wrote it down. It's about the modern society. Anthropologists have often described what happens to a primitive society when its spiritual values are exposed to the impact of modern civilization. When the ancients meet the new, right? Its people lose the meanings of their lives, their social organization disintegrates, and they themselves morally decay. All right? You following me? We are now in the same condition, but we have never really understood what we have lost, for our spiritual leaders, unfortunately, were more interested in protecting their institutions than in understanding the mystery that symbols present.
Interesting. It was actually something I was thinking about. Maybe that's the answer to it, because I was just thinking about how there's, like, in a way, like you were kind of saying before with the Catholic... I guess it was the Catholic Church, how they canonized the big, what was it? Maybe. They
discussed it. They didn't end up doing it.
They considered canonizing it? Is that...
That was my understanding, yeah, of this. That's not, this is my understanding that I heard from a debate from Christopher Hitchens.
Regardless of whether or not that's true, I think there is, like, this idea where sometimes, I guess it works kind of... No, I think it actually kind of works the other way, where sometimes people... attempt to reconcile certain ideas by trying to fit them into religion, or the other way around, they try to fit religious ideas into, let's say, science or whatever, their understanding of the world. But I feel like we sometimes try so desperately to, like, do that because we want everything that we know to be true and right and, like, everything to add up and for there not to be any cognitive dissonance. But like, you can't always, like, fit a square into a circle, or a circle into, you know what I'm saying? Like, unless it's big enough. But it's not always possible.
It bothers me a lot. It bothers me a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of different concepts and ideas. When I see people that, in my understanding, are, like, way off of, like, the biblical perception and readings, and they're still holding on to the Bible, I'm like, for me it's odd. I'm just like, I would have thrown it in the garbage already,
Like, what should you be taking away from it?
I understand people.
What should you do?
You shouldn't read it. I don't know if you need to read it. I don't.
Yeah.
No, like, if you don't believe in it, like, I'm not sure how. If I would read it, I don't know. If the question right now, like, if we really decide right now, we don't believe in God, this is an archaic idea, and, like, these people were tripping and they had some crazy experience, he was abducted by aliens, I don't know, whatever, right? and like this whole book is just made up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I would take it off my shelf. I don't know.
Interesting.
If it was just a historical, I think I would take it off. I don't know.
Here's like an alternate opinion because I don't know, maybe not, but I just started reading it over Shabbos, which I don't know, sometimes just seems like weird. But I started reading this book. It's called The Book of J, and it's, I don't know, like if you're familiar, but it had like a couple of paragraphs prior to like just like the text, and honestly I don't really understand it because I'm not really so familiar with it, but it's the idea that like, you know, the Bible is written by like 4 different authors, like J, P, E, W, R, something like that. I think 5 or 1.
Okay, what's the source for that? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know because I never did research on it after. Like I only read it over Shabbos, and then I never actually had a chance to do further. That's what I should have done last night when I couldn't sleep, but that's not. I didn't end up doing that. I forgot about it. But he kind of, the argument that the author makes prior to just putting in the interpretation of the Book of J is really just Genesis, Exodus, and I think Deuteronomy. I think so. I think so. Yeah. So the idea is that the author attempts to make is he's like kind of, which I think maybe still stands regardless of whether or not it's true or not, is that you kind of have to like shed your belief because it's been like so religionized kind of, like the Bible. But even let's say there is like truth to it, right? And it's not just like a work of literature. Is like that you kind of just have to like shed your previous like beliefs and the way like society has framed it, and kind of like come to it just as like kind of as just reading it as like a work of like great literature like Shakespeare or like something like that, and kind of, I don't know, not, I guess, read more into it than there really is type of thing. I just thought it was interesting and like different because I wasn't really so familiar with that, but I'm not sure what sort of like the basis for it all is.
So I definitely believe in that on a certain level. Just because, like, very basically, as the Talmud like points out, I think it's actually Mishnah in Avos, right? Hafochba v'afochba v'kulaba.
Can you define that? Yeah.
That you can find you'll find everything in the Torah, basically in the Bible. You'll find examples for everything, and the question is, in this moment, how do we go about whatever the matter at hand is, right? In other words, the Bible is actually a lot deeper and a lot more layered and a lot more nuanced than people think. And if you don't come to it with an open mind, someone's going to trick you into thinking it says something that it doesn't say. I mean, a simple example for me would be I was having a discussion with somebody over the summer, and I mentioned this concept of like you have to listen to the rabbi, right? And I think that's garbage. Like if you think that what the rabbi is saying is wrong, then I don't think you should be listening to him, right? When I say wrong, I don't mean inconvenient. I mean wrong. Right? If you think that this is not the will of God, then why are you listening to him? As the Talmud points out, Divrei Harav, v'Divrei HaTalmud, Divrei Mishomim. If the teacher says something and the student says something, like, who do you listen to? So, like, if your understanding is that God wants you to do X, but your rabbi is telling you to do Y, why are you listening to your rabbi again? Because you don't trust your intuition of what God wants from you? Like, that's not healthy. Go build up some confidence. Or because you think your rabbi is so much more intelligent than you. Because I could say for you specifically, your rabbi is not that much smarter than you. I know because I learned with him b'chavrusa in yeshiva. Right? No, like, these people, these rabbis who are telling people what to do, like, they're my friends from when I was in yeshiva, half of them. You know, like, they're not, you weren't smart then, you're not smart now. Sorry. You know?
But you are.
I mean, and no, I'm not smart either, but I'm going to think for myself. And a lot of the times they're not thinking for themselves. Their rabbi told them what his rabbi told them, what his rabbi told them. And meanwhile, it was a misprint from 500 years ago. Somebody accidentally switched the word. You know what I mean? Like, this, by the way, incidentally, is some of what the Vilna Gaon did when he learned Talmud. is he questioned things all the way to the point in which he would just be like, this word is spelled incorrectly.
There's no
And this
deeper
is just,
meaning.
like-
It just spelled incorrectly.
Yeah, there are you'll have like
Right.
stuff like that where it's just like, this is a misprint, this is out of place, this is whatever, right? And like if you acknowledge that, then you can deal with it. If you don't acknowledge it, then there's just nothing to deal with it. And sometimes things just don't make sense because they're simply wrong. Right? Sometimes. Now, it doesn't mean that the whole tradition is wrong. It just means somewhere along the way something went weird. It's hard to always trace everything back as to exactly where that point was. But I think I'm more than okay with people thinking for themselves. Then you'll also have to deal with your own consequences when you think incorrectly, and that's you to deal with. But this dogmatic idea of I should be listening to somebody else telling me what to do. He wasn't ordained. He doesn't have smicha. He's not anyone like biblically speaking, right? In other words, who are you? Now you should definitely take what people say into consideration if they can justify it and if what they're saying is intelligent. I'm not saying write everyone off and just be as bullheaded and just ignore everyone else. I'm not saying to ignore people, but like you have to have a justification and an explanation for what you're doing. If you can't explain to me what you're doing, maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
Not just because Kabbalah it's not a good enough reason.
To just say I'm doing it because my parents did it, because their parents did it, because their parents did it, like you may as well be any religion. And the funny part is, if you actually read the books of the prophets, which nobody does because it would be dangerous, they would let you open up your mind and think for yourself. The general, when the prophets come to chastise the people about serving idols, their go-to reply is often, "This is what our parents do. This is like our tradition. Like, who are you to tell me not to do this? Is my tradition." But the reality is, the prophet doesn't care what your tradition is. What you're doing is wrong. Nobody cares about what your parents did. That's not a justification for doing what you're doing.
It's funny because that rabbi that I was listening to speak last night, he kind of keeps saying, first of all, he's like a little bit condescending about people who kind of question God a little bit. He's like, you really have to be honest with yourself and not whatever. Basically he is implying that there really is no you really shouldn't have not that you shouldn't have these questions, but if you really just like allow yourself to think on your own, like then you're not going to have these questions. It's only because you're like surrounded by people that you want to like argue with and like whatever, that you're like, oh, God doesn't exist, or things like that, which I was like, I feel like it's totally the other way around, but okay. But also he makes this like he started to like say, which I did not appreciate at all, and I think it's totally wrong, that people who don't believe in God, or they want to not believe in God or whatever, they're lazy. And I was just like, I feel like it's also the other way around. The people who do just like take it and are like, okay, yeah, like this is the way my parents did it. This is the way, I was taught in school. My rabbi said, like, or even listening to this rabbi, I feel like me just listening to him is lazy at this point. Like I think that it's not lazy at all to like question and to argue, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like not a defense mechanism, but like a system mechanism. I think like you've mentioned this before. Like if you're right, like if you can't allow outside thought.
Systems want to perpetuate
you can't
themselves.
really allow like outside thought into the system, and if you do, you could just say it in a really condescending tone, so it just doesn't sound right and scare people off.
You straw man everything.
Yes, he did that totally.
But it's so dangerous because the reality is when somebody stops to think for themselves, they realize you've been strawmanning everything, and their automatic instinct is like, wow, there must be so much truth there. Because if there wasn't truth, then why does he feel the necessity to strawman it? Why are you avoiding it? So like the automatic go-to is like, I have a friend from Lakewood actually, who converted to Christianity. Because he started thinking for himself, and everyone had always been bashing Christianity. He started learning. He got a couple books on like Christian philosophy, and he was like, "This is brilliant," right? And he actually got baptized. His aunts were still reading him shidduchim, but like he was baptized to Christianity, and obviously he's not going to tell anyone because they've been bashing this thing his entire life. So who did he tell? He told a couple random friends of his who like couldn't give a crap, like me. Like, oh. So I don't even really know him that well. He's a genius. Like I know the guy. He's brilliant. He's out of the box thinker. He's absolutely brilliant. and he stumbled across all the truth in Christianity. And the problem is also when you look from the outside, you only see the beautiful part because you're not inside yet. So like there are plenty of people who look from the outside who see Judaism and they see families and they see like Shabbat dinner and like it's so beautiful and like, you know, there's so much love and chesed and like a lot of kindness and you see beautiful. And when you're inside, then you can start to see that there's also a dark underbelly.
Right. I mean,
right?
I think there is like the nice, beautiful part also.
There's a ton of beauty. Yeah. But from the outside, one second. From the outside, you only see the beauty, right? You come to a Chabad meal, it's great. You don't realize that they're never going to let you marry into their family, right?
Right.
You don't know that unless you're in the system. When you're in the system, then you're like, oh, we don't really respect like all those other Jews are kind of wrong, but like whatever, we're still going to love them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like once you're inside, you see the dark, and it wasn't obviously if people you know are in one religion looking at another, it just looks great. It's like coming to the fridge and you're hungry, you open up the fridge, you eat whatever you want. You're not even thinking straight because like people already gave you this perception of like, you know, meaning and in religion, like you find like purpose and meaning through religion. Your religion crumbled, now you need another one to replace it. You're starving right now, and the reality is no one explained to you what was wrong with any other religion. They just built up straw men and knocked them over. But the reality is that's just not what's really going on in other religions. You go, you look, you see a ton of truth, you see a ton of like depth, and then you switch to that one. Whereas if somebody would have just addressed it in the beginning, they could steel man it and then explain why we disagree with all those things or why we don't. Then the problem is that a lot of the things we don't disagree with. And that's the issue. You have to understand. You really have to analyze yourself if you want to do that. In other words, if you're gonna fight a steel man, you have to be stronger than steel. And most people do not have a perception of their own religion that's stronger than steel, because they've never really thought about their own religion. They've never really analyzed it and broke it down in order to build it back up, because you're worried to attack your own religion because what if it's straw?
Yeah, that was another argument the rabbi kept bringing up that I was like, what? He's like, you can't argue against it unless like, you know, he's like, the people who argue against it aren't really in it, because I guess he was referring to people who like, he was like, oh yeah, there's like a man who like came over to me on the plane, it was like, oh, you're Jewish, let's argue or something. I don't know, but I don't think this is true. I think, like you were saying, like he was kind of just building up this like straw man, but yeah, I don't know. I think there's also something like, this is something I always like advocate for, but or whatever, theoretically. I was like, I never understood why like the schools, like as somebody who went to like Chabad schools my whole life and then went to like a public university, so you know you're like taught like so many things in terms of like science, like, you know, like evolution isn't real, and like we would skip those questions on the regents, or like I don't know, things, you know, like that. And then like being in like a university where like these things are like just like evolution, like I don't know, like of course that's like the way granted. Things is, yeah, like it's not like and people who are like don't believe in it are like scoffed at, or like also, or let's say like the Big Bang, or like things like that, right, which are like considered common scientific thought. So my argument was that, at least in my firmer days, not that I'm not firm, but just like when I was like more, you know, more religious, of a believer in the traditional God, as we could say, I was like, I really think that schools, like the school I went to, like, I don't know, Beis Rivka, like they should have kind of, you know, maybe taught, like they should have avoided evolution, like they should have taught it and then maybe brought in like their counter arguments. They don't have counter arguments. They don't know. Well, maybe they need them. Or maybe they don't. There's a book by Aryeh Kaplan. He has a hardcover book and one of the soft cover, like thin ones. The thin one is Kabbalah and the Age of the Universe. Okay. And the thick one is like Resurrection, something, and the Age of like something Resurrection and the Age of the Universe, something like that. I have it in the other room. But in that book, he discusses like different like Jewish opinions and like Jewish thought throughout the ages. And the reality is, like, there are plenty. Immortality, Resurrection, and the Age of the Universe is the full book. And then it's like three different essays
and they made a paperback out of the Age of the Universe essay. But apparently there are plenty of different opinions in like Kabbalah where that discuss that like there are different cycles of humanity. So I don't know if you're familiar with the whole like thousands of years. Are you familiar there's a concept in Kabbalah that I think most people are familiar with, that the world is like going to exist for like 7,000 years. You familiar with that? And each 1,000 years is like another like portion.
Okay.
So there's a concept in Kabbalah that's like the fractal, that our system of humanity or whatever is 7,000 years, but then there are 7 groups of 7,000. Stuff like that.
Interesting.
So there's an opinion in the Talmud apparently that Adam from the Bible was like not remotely the first man. There's this opinion in the Talmud that the generation that received the Torah at Sinai, received the Bible, was the 100th generation. Okay, now that doesn't really make sense according to the idea of Adam being the first man. Right? The math just doesn't work out. From Adam to Noah, there are, I believe, 10 generations, right? And then from Noah down to Abraham is another 10. And then after that, there's like a handful. 7, whatever it is, like 7 or something like that.
Got it.
So that would mean that Adam
and that was also over a period of 3,000 years. So
that would mean that Adam was like the 60th something generation, according to that opinion in the Talmud. So Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan discusses this in his book, and he's like, the reality is in Jewish thought and like Kabbalistic thought and stuff like that, we have all these different types of opinions, some of which range from here to like this whole idea of like the 7,000 years. So some people say it might be 7,000 years of God, and the year of God is 1,000 years of us, and stuff like that. Like a whole, and he comes up with calculations according to Kabbalah that like the world is like 15 billion years old. Because and there's also debates as if there's like cycles of 7,000. So which cycle are we in now? That's a debate. Are we in the second cycle? Are we in the sixth cycle? Are we in the 7th cycle? Like, reality is all these things are really left open in Kabbalistic thought. Like, no one in Kabbalistic thought thinks that like the creation story is meant to be 100% taken like literally, and like the world is 5,000 whatever years old. Like the average person does not think that in the Kabbalistic.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like, okay, well, first of all, to a certain degree, I feel like in a way, I don't want to sound accusatory, but in a way, you kind of are attempting, right, to like reconcile that like Torah or spiritual Kabbalistic view with the scientific view. I'm not sure that it's a bad thing. Like, I wonder if it's actually a good thing. Actually,
but that wasn't. One second. The Talmud's discussion of where we're holding in reality, right, in like the world, existence of the world, predates the scientific discussion by years. All I'm saying is that it's not clear for you to read the Bible and be like, oh, the Bible clearly says 5,000 something years, and anyone who doesn't say that is not Jewish. You would be taking a bunch of rabbis from the Talmud and saying they're not religious, which doesn't actually make sense. So Rabbi Kaplan's example of that, also is he discusses the concept of whether or not there are aliens, right? And he's like, there are people who think like if you believe in aliens, you're like not religious. Like religious Jews don't believe in aliens, right? But he's like, again, there's an opinion in the Talmud that he breaks it down that there are aliens. So like we're gonna say this rabbi in the Talmud like wasn't religious. These opinions. Yeah. What's the story with the Rebbe? You know the story with the Rebbe?
Yeah, you can say it.
Did you tell it to me?
No, sure. There's actually two thoughts that I know my earth science teacher told us that in 10th grade, Mrs. Sherpin. She told us that she had like an extra credit. She was like, find in the Tanakh where there's like a reference to alien life, and I think there's like a reference in Shiras Deborah.
Yeah, that's what it is. Our Meroz V'Ar Yeshva. Yeah. Yeah,
and also then there's a story with the Rebbe where I think maybe like there was like a scientist or something. He was like, oh, like should we like, is it like a futile look, like to kind of like just search the universe for other life? And I think the Rebbe said, like, you know, if to like put a limit on what is possible is like putting a limit on God, basically implying that it's possible that there can still be life. I don't know. I mean, like, that's kind of, I feel like the whole, like,
the way I heard the story was that somebody came to the Rebbe and asked him if Judaism believes in life on other planets. Okay. And he's like, believes? Go look. Like,
that's a good story too.
We don't have like beliefs, like, but like we decided Judaism believes the world is this old. Like, no one, it never said that. At no point does the Bible say the world is, there's this story in the Bible, but like no one's to say, again, 7 days of creation. Like, how do you understand that? You have days before you have a sun and a moon. Like, what does it mean by day? How are we defining days? Is it our day? Is it God's day? Is it this, like, is it just a expression? We're just saying passage of time? Or are we even referencing any real day? Like, you have to say that. You're bound to say that because you have a day passes without a sun and a moon. Right? So clearly it's not the day that we perceive, because to us that day requires a sun. Yeah. We need the sun in order to see that the world's revolving.
Right. It's interesting.
So, like, I don't know what any of this means, and obviously, like, plenty of people can say it's a cop-out, you know, you're trying to work it out with... But I'm just showing that I don't think people ever really understood most of these things, like, literally, you know, in this sense. And to me, obviously, I'm going to put truth before everything. So, like, to me, it's irrelevant if I'm working it out with the Bible or not on a certain level, because... Again, truth should even come to me before the biblical story, because if we don't analyze the biblical story from a place of truth, then, again, we just don't know what it means.
And I feel like sometimes the question, at least for myself, I consider, like, does it really matter? Like, does it really matter if the Bible or the Torah, right, is, like, the truth? Or not necessarily the truth, but, like, the Word of God, or, like... There's, like, clearly still, like, lessons and, like, important things that we can, like, take from it separate from, I don't know. I think I kind of think it's, like, a little bit of, like, maybe a bad thing to think that it's, like, really the Word of God. Like, I don't know. Like, that gets us, I feel like, into, like, messy territory a little bit. But, like you were saying, kind of just to, like, take it, like, to think for yourself and, you know, see what makes sense, not based off of what other people kind of tell you or expect you to think.
Yeah. On a certain level, to me, it doesn't have to be messy necessarily, but it's also kind of irrelevant because, like I said before, everything's in it. So, like, if you want to make a point, you'll be able to make that point from anywhere. So, like, again, what do you do with that information? It's kind of like, in other words, yeah, you could pretty much say whatever you want and then pin it on the Bible.
Right, like you could figure out how to make it work.
Always, yeah. Right? So in that sense, what you are saying and what you're it means more. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, really, the burden lies on you as an individual, because whatever you want to say or don't say or prove, you can always pull it out of the Bible. There's different opinions for everything.
So it's just really subjective at the end of the day. I don't know if
on a certain level, yeah. On a certain level, it is. Books don't read themselves. I don't know if you're aware of this phenomena.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it has to be subjective, but that doesn't mean that what you're extracting. I'm trying to remember where I saw this written, but I saw this idea of the Arizal didn't read the Zohar, and the Zohar read the Arizal.
Interesting.
That really the Arizal was meditating on the Zohar and using it to extract all these concepts and ideas from his own mind, and it's really irrelevant as to whether the Zohar was or was not saying that. So, like, I think we often do that with the Bible as well. Like, we just pull out these lessons and understandings of how we see things, And maybe that's what it's there for. Maybe the Bible is there for us to think, you know? As Jordan says, is the prerequisite for the manifestation of truth.
Yeah.
Like, it's there for us to have something to think off of, you know?
Right. I guess it just gets, I feel like this is the part that gets, like, I don't know, weird, is that I guess I'm really just coming back to that point that I just keep coming back to, is that I really feel like people, or I don't feel, I think, that people, or my experience, it seems to be that, like, people really attempt to like, say that either things in the Bible are true when they're not, or that they also try to think, like, okay, like, you know, like, there's some things there that are just, like, obviously, like, in a 21st century person would just be like, there's clearly things that don't seem moral or right there.
You want to pick something just to have a discussion about?
Like murdering cities because they're idol worshippers. I don't know. Seems a little extreme. I don't know. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else. But, so, like, I don't know, that seems like a little extreme, especially the women and children, like we said before. They don't really have an opinion, or at least the children. Or probably the women in those days also. So, like, but people still attempt to, like, reconcile it, be like, no, like, it's okay, the reason why was because of this, or because it means this, or because God is, I don't know, like, it's like, it doesn't really make sense to me, I don't know. So I guess I guess it's just hard to really say, like, okay, or to accept, not that you should necessarily accept things, but that to, like, kind of, yeah, like, accept it, really, or, like, say, like, okay, there seems to be a lot of truth here, but then there also seems to not be. And so then it's hard or difficult or it doesn't make sense, and I don't think maybe I should or shouldn't, I don't know. Say, like you were saying before, to, like, where, okay, everything is really found in the Torah, or, like, there's I don't know, maybe I'm misquoting you now, but, like, I don't know. I'm not a fan. Did I say that coherently?
Of murdering people who are idol worshippers? What are you not a fan of?
Yeah, but no, yes, I'm not a fan of that. But I'm also not a fan of people attempting to justify it, because I think people still do. Like, okay, yes, we had to murder all the people that were living in Israel at the time because, or whatever it was, because, like, there was, I don't know, what was the reason? It doesn't really make sense to me. It does, like, I think people really do, I don't know, I sometimes, like, have these discussions either with, like, my brother or, like, my parents about it, and, like, they like, try to, like, reconcile these, like, ideas in Torah that really seem very, like, egregious, or, like, not something that normal people in the 21st century would condone, you know? So
let me ask you a weird question, though. This was like what I was discussing about finding everything there. Yeah. Do you think, let's say right now you meet an idol worshiper down the block, right? Is there a rabbi in the world who would tell you it's your job to kill him?
No.
Or her? Okay, now, are they also not reading the book honestly?
I don't know, in a way.
Or does the book
maybe
not...
there is, like, some sort of, like, cognitive dissonance that's going on there as well.
I'm asking you, like, do you think, have you read the book?
Like the Torah? Yeah. Several times.
Okay, does the Torah want everyone to kill idol worshippers? Is that, like, part of the Torah, or did this happen historically at some point?
I think it's more of a historical thing, but I think people still attempt to say, like, yeah, okay, God, commanded people to do that in those days or whatever. Right now, we don't have the Torah, but maybe, or we don't have like a based in and whatever, but maybe if we did, then we would still be doing things like that. Because I think that's what people think, really, or that's what they seem to.
I mean, I
express.
think when the Jews had their Besdin and their the whole works, like when they were living in Israel with prophets, like they weren't, once they were here, they were not on a war rampage
You're saying once they
to kill non-believers.
Yeah, because they already killed them all out before.
No, what does that mean? There were plenty of them.
They
There were plenty of them
did.
in their own borders. The Jews became idol worshippers.
Yeah, it's true too.
They were not. I mean, other than that one Eliyahu story, on Har Carmel. Like as far as I know, there were no. The other way around, Izebel was massacring prophets of God, right?
Yeah.
Of
Right. I guess it's just okay. So maybe I don't know. Maybe it doesn't
I'm
matter.
pretty sure
Maybe,
historically there were more Jewish prophets that were murdered than there were by Jews. In other words, than there were idol worshippers murdered by Jews.
Yeah. So maybe that's the problem. But I think that
More idol worshippers killed, biblical prophets than Bible believers killed idol worshippers.
I got it. But
Just
maybe,
to clarify, right?
maybe that's the that's the problem. Like, or maybe not. Maybe that's just
I think
maybe
we started it.
No, maybe it's just supposed to all be like. No, maybe it's all supposed to be like figurative, like what does idol worship really mean, and I feel like that's the way it's like often interpreted, maybe really. So maybe I'm just arguing myself, but right, what is idol worship? Like I feel like I've learned like sikhas or mimers of the Rebbe or something. Like what does idol worship really mean? It means kind of being like I don't know, self, like being angry is like a form of idol worship, or like being like not having humility or like things like that, right? So maybe it's just all figurative. I don't know. But the thing is that it often doesn't seem that way when people argue it. But maybe it doesn't matter what it seems that way to other people, and it just matters to what it seems like to myself.
I think. I mean, it's impossible for me to say historically, but generally, I think that it was both. There's the literal and the figurative, and I think the figurative is really what it's there for, but that doesn't negate necessarily the literal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think a lot. Let's say Amalek, right? Amalek stands for Asher Karcha Baderech. They stand for doubt and happenstance and stuff like that. Lack of meaning, lack of purpose,
Yeah.
apathy, and there's that idea of that you have to get rid of that completely. Well, that doesn't mean they weren't also just trying to kill these people. I think they were.
Right. Yeah. I guess.
But again, that's really not. It's because they represent this concept, and we're trying to physically act out physically something that we believe, spiritually, or something to that effect, in this weird way. But again, it's really not about the acting out. It would be like like karbanot, or like going back to davening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're killing this animal in the sense of trying to represent that you're willing to sacrifice for God, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, it's like a representation of this idea and concept. It's really not about killing the animals, so much so that there were prophets who came and they're like, yo, God's not hungry, stop killing animals. And by the way, I would relate that back to prayer, where generally religious Jews say prayer is in place of sacrifices, and I would say the same way at a certain point God's like, I don't need your sacrifices. I would say if there was a prophet nowadays, he would walk into synagogue and say, God does not need you mumbling. You don't have to come and mumble.
True.
He doesn't care. You don't have to bring all these sacrifices. God's not hungry. They're supposed to represent something, and if they represent something, then that gives them meaning. And if they don't, then they have no meaning. There's nothing to them. They're an empty vessel,
Yeah.
a
So how
kli
do we
without an or.
How do we reconcile, like, right, Judaism is usually all about like the action. It really doesn't matter, or a lot of times it really
I
doesn't
disagree
matter
with that
what
completely.
you think or
Modern
do.
day Judaism.
Yeah, modern day Judaism.
I think that's ridiculous. One second. We have this concept in Judaism, let's say, of like, what do we believe? Question, what do Jews believe, right?
Yeah.
Fine. And now there's this Ani Maimonides from Maimonides, right? He wrote these 13 attributes of faith.
Mm-hmm.
This is what Jews believe. And there are people who read them every day after their prayers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't believe them just because you read them.
Okay.
What? You don't get to read a set of beliefs and be like, okay, I'm Jewish now. Like, what?
Right.
Do you believe these or not? If you believe these, then according to Maimonides, you're a Jew. If you don't believe these, then you're not the definition of Maimonides of a basic religious Jew, which is okay with me. I don't think Maimonides gets to decide who's a religious Jew and who's not. I don't think that's his department.
Oh.
You know what I mean? I don't think he gets to say who's holy in the eyes of the Lord and who's not. That's just not. Only a Sephardi can say something like that, right? No, like.
Wow, very accurate stereotype there.
but this concept of like, oh, I read it. Like, this goes back to like the old thing of like, what do you believe? And I don't believe you believe what you say you believe. That's just a lip service. I think we all know people who are, going to synagogue and praying, and they don't believe in God.
Right.
If you don't know those people, trust me, they exist. You know what I mean?
No, I'm sure they do.
But like, and as if they're doing anyone a favor. Like, who are you doing a favor?
Maybe.
You're not doing yourself a favor. You're not doing me a favor.
Maybe it's better.
You're doing God a favor. Like God needs you to come and mumble. No, absolutely not. It's better for you to understand what you really believe, and if you understand what you really believe, then you can start to individuate and be yourself. We need you to be the best possible you can be. Now, when you are your best possible you, can that include going to synagogue? Of course it can. Doesn't have to. There were plenty of prophets who didn't go to synagogue. I don't think Abraham davened with a minion, It's kind of irrelevant to me, and so much so Rabbi Kaplan has a theoretical conspiracy theory that minyan was created for gullus in order to prevent intermarriage. But we'll get to that.
So then why don't they let women be a part of the minyan? No?
Because they wanted to keep you at home,
Guess so.
where you belong.
Oh.
Where, anyways, you said you wanted to be at home. No, isn't that how you started this conversation?
I mean, a little bit, but maybe at least go down the block or something. Go across the street to shul.
I mean, generally, I think the answer is that women, in a way, can connect 24/7. They really don't need to have like an official service.
Yeah, I know. But
No,
yeah,
I do happen to think that's true. Like, women have generally like just deeper connections, and like they don't need to make it like a whole like sit down. Imagine prayer as like a therapy session.
Okay.
As like men need to like dedicate and put aside time to like work on this relationship with God. Whereas women are just they're having a relationship all the time, and it's like healthy, and they don't need to necessarily like dedicate like 3 times a day, like put a set aside time to like work on this relationship. It's just like, yeah, I'm good,
Where just constant work. Interesting. I think I don't know. I guess I just wonder if like if there's still a place for Judaism of the non-thinker, kind of.
I thought you were gonna say for women, and I was like, no way.
No, I'm kind of.
Is there a place for Judaism of the non-thinker? I mean, on a certain level, but let's not pretend like he's accomplishing like these There's a portion of Shari Kedusha. I wonder if I could find it right now. My safer's in the other room, I think, which is written by Reb Chaim Vital, who is a student of the Arizal. Most of what we have as the Arizal's Kabbalistic literature was written by Reb Chaim Vital. It was written by his student. And he discusses this idea of like connecting spiritually, and then being able to create change in like the spiritual realms. Basically, the way I understand it is like we are connected very loosely to the spiritual realms, right? Even maybe to the intellectual, some people to the emotional, like We're connected loosely. Now you can build those connections. Right now it's a rope. Now if you shake the rope down here, at the top where it's connected, there's very little movement. It's just going to shake in the middle. If you can turn that rope in theory into a stick, right? More and more of a stick. And a stick, if you move it down here, you could just tip it. It might move up there a crazy amount. And it's possible to do that, in my understanding, in the Kabbalistic literature. But for the average person, it's just a very lightly tied string at most. And like when you do something down here, you're not affecting all these crazy realms. You're just not. If you just do something. Now, if you understand what you're doing and you think about it and you're like having all these meditations and this and that, that is the way to create that stick, to ascend into the spiritual realms, kind of, and to affect them. But like to pretend like everyone's doing that, to me, it's just not a reality. What you're doing is nice, and you should continue doing what you're doing, maybe, because at one point, if we don't do what we're doing, in other words, let's say tefillin. I already had this discussion with someone else on one of the different podcasts, but we'll mention it because it's just an easy thing to understand. Tefillin are supposed to represent the unity, right? If you say like the for people who say like the little Yehi Ratzon at the beginning, like the Hasidic, like Kabbalistic thing, it says Sheish bem Yichudo ve'achduso yisbarach shemo. They have the yichud, the unity, and the singularity and the unity. I don't know which word would be which, but the singularity and the unity of the infinite, right? That's the idea that it's representing. Okay, and you tie it on your arm and your head, and it's supposed to be for an os, a symbol, ulototafos, and like a representation, right? So it's supposed to, in theory, be a reminder of something. Okay, now I'm not saying you shouldn't have reminders, but reminders are there to remind you. If you remember without the reminder, you've accomplished more than if the reminder went off and you don't know what it meant. So if my alarm sounds right now, and I don't know what it means, I haven't actually accomplished anything. And if I remember that I have to do whatever I have to do, and I do it without my alarm going off, I'm golden. Now, there's a perfect balance. The best way to do it is to set a reminder to remind you what you have to do tomorrow, and to do it. To me, that's like most of Judaism on a certain level. Like all these actions are all there as reminders for these concepts and ideas and spiritual whatever. That's what they're all there for. Now, you can't take away the reminder, because if you take away the reminder within a certain amount of time, you won't have the Judaism anymore. You won't have anything to remind you. You just won't remember on your own.
Or if you just
but to pretend like we're accomplishing something by listening to the alarm, and everyone crowds around the alarm, and they listen, they wait, it's going to go off soon, and then it goes off, and everyone goes, oh my God, I heard it. Did you hear it? Yeah, I heard it too. And everyone's all excited. The alarm went off, and I heard it, and I was closer than you were, and I heard it louder. I heard every beep, and you only heard 3 beeps, and he only heard 1 beep. It's just a freaking alarm. Well, you didn't do anything.
You didn't experience God in that moment.
You didn't experience God at all. Like, I'm sure there's depth and meaning and understanding. That's the idea of all these Yehi Ratzons and all these like, because that's what it's there for. It's not there like, it's not there so that you can suffer with it and pretend like you're all holy in this masochistic way of like, I woke up even earlier than you to pray. Okay, you know what you said? No. Yeah. But I said all the words. Okay, good for you. Who decided that you gain anything from saying words you don't understand? Like, who made that up? That's such a crazy concept.
The only thing is that it gets like, I feel like it still gets not confusing, but I feel like there's something still to the action, right? Like, just like having these like thoughts or feelings in yourself and not actually doing anything in terms of like expressing it or like expression of any of those thoughts, like that kind of, I feel like also defeats the purpose a little bit. Like,
this is the Dira Patachtonim thing on a certain level. Again.
Yeah.
On a certain level. I'm not going to disagree with that. I would agree with that on a certain level. On a certain level, I think it depends for what. I think everything is going to be different. In other words, certain things have, certain actions have, I think, intrinsic value, and certain actions don't. In other words, let's say I love you, and therefore I'm going to give you something, or I'm going to help you, or I'm going to be kind to you. Like, that action obviously has an intrinsic value. Right? Even if I don't love you, even if I hate your guts, if I lend you money, I've just done you a favor.
Right.
Right? Now, I think some actions that at certain point have no real intrinsic value on a certain level on their own, and that's like the expression of love. In other words, if I hate your guts and I buy you, and I tell you I love you, or something, I hate your guts. I haven't done anything for you.
Right. Or what if
right?
I love you, but I don't. And let's say I even think I love you, but then my actions don't actually express that.
That's
and maybe
also
actually
a problem.
Express the opposite. Yeah.
That's also a problem. But on
problems.
a certain level, if I know you love me, right, and you call me out and you're like, dude, you're like being such an ass right now, right? It's not gonna bother me if I know that, like, this, if I know there's something here. On a certain level, like, the words, to me, words are, on a certain level, words are cheap, and words becomes infinitely more cheap if I know what you're thinking. So if God can read your thoughts, right, which obviously, I think most people have a perception of God in which your thoughts are open before God, right, then your words become significantly cheap. Now, your words have a great level of significance in the sense of generally we think through speaking. We also think through doing. That's my understanding of Nasa V'Nishma. Is I'm doing things, and through doing things, I start to think, why am I doing what I'm doing? What does this mean to me? Because if you didn't put on tefillin, it wouldn't trigger. That's the alarm. So it's important to put them on because they trigger the Nasa V'Nishma. We do things, and then we understand what we're doing. It's also the expansion of human consciousness. Like, all those ideas to me are important, but to pretend like the words have value if I don't even believe them and I don't even know what I'm saying, and this is to a God who knows what I'm thinking, like, I don't believe in God, but these words have value. What?
Right. But that's the thing, is like, in a way, like, the experience sometimes leads to knowledge. So sometimes you need to be able to, or maybe belief, or whatever we want to call it.
It could, but you have to. They say mitoch shelo lishma balishma, right? You're familiar with that Talmudic? From doing something shelo lishma, like without proper intent, eventually you'll do it with intent.
Right.
But the Talmud says that's only when you want to.
It has to come from within.
It has to. In other words, if I really want to, let's say you love someone. Let's go back to that idea, right? And I really want to, like, do everything like amazing for them, but at the same time, I have there's other things going on. I don't really necessarily want to, like, do so much for them, even though, like, I know it's helpful. But, like, I'm gonna give to them anyways, right? So eventually, that can get to a point in where you do it comfortably, and where, like, you do it out of, like, full love for the other person, right? Let's say you have a kid, right? And you're like, oh my God, this is such a pain. You have to, like, feed them, change their diapers, this and that. Like, you love your kid, but, like, you're not really feeling doing all these things with complete love, right? Obviously, you do it anyways, and eventually, hopefully, like, the love will follow, and you'll, like, want your kid to be comfortable, and you want your kid to be fed, and, like, you don't just, when you hear the kid crying, it's not just like, oh my God, this again. It's like, it's more like, oh, there's a problem. Like, let me see if I can help, right? That could be nice, but it's not a given. If you're just fed up with the fact that you had a kid and it was like a total mistake, and, like, I wish she had gotten an abortion, and then I can become more and more like, angry, and that's not the word I'm looking for, but, like, hostile at every interaction. And it just grows and festers, and I could just end up hitting the kid. Like, I've met people who, like, years ago, I met this girl who's, like, had a teenage pregnancy, and I'm like, where's the dad? Just out of curiosity. She's like, he's in jail. I'm like, what? Like, apparently the kid had like multiple fractures across their entire body. Like, it's not,
Yeah.
you know, to take care of someone who's dependent on you. If you really don't want to and you really don't want to be there, you're not doing anyone a favor.
Right.
Now you're doing everyone a favor if you decide this is my responsibility and I want to stay because this is my responsibility and I'm going to try to be the best father as possible. Then that's great and that's noble and that's amazing. But to like stay and be bitter, your bitterness will only grow. You know, you have to want to be here, otherwise.
I wonder, yeah, like, because there's a part of it, right, where there's just like that, like, duty, right? Like, you have a duty to, maybe you have a duty to God, to like, you know, or you have a duty to your kid or something like that. Or there's a part of it that's like the love, right? So I wonder.
I'm not saying you don't theoretically have a duty. I'm
important.
saying if you don't want to accept that duty willingly on yourself, then it's just going to manifest in all these horrific ways. I'm not saying you don't have a duty. I'm just saying, I'm not saying you don't owe this, whatever it is. I'm just saying for a father to stay when he really doesn't want to, merely because he feels forced into it, he's probably going to be the worst father you could ever imagine.
Right.
And it would probably be better if he stepped out and let her remarry to somebody else who maybe actually is okay, like wants to raise these kids to some extent, or is okay with it. Like if he's spite-filled and he doesn't want to accept this as his responsibility, you're unlikely you're doing someone a favor. You can send money because, again, money is what? Money is that action which has its own intrinsic value, regardless of your intent. Right? Yeah. So you can go to work and across the other side of the country and send child support. That's beautiful, you know? But to stay and help raise these kids when you're filled with spite and you wish they weren't born, imagine instilling that in children. You were my mistake, and I wish I didn't have to be here. I think it's better without a father. Thanks.
It's pretty unfortunate, yeah. I was just actually reading, there's another aspect that might also contribute. We read this book for my book club called When Nietzsche Wept by Irvin Yalom. And
called
it's
what?
Fictional. It's called When Nietzsche Wept, like, you know, the philosopher.
Oh, When Nietzsche Wept, okay.
Yeah. And it's a fictional story, but it's like theoretically, if Joseph Brauer, who was I think Sigmund Freud's teacher, or like if he, and like the father of psychotherapy, like if he kind of like had this like interaction with Nietzsche, like kind of how the development of psychotherapy kind of comes about. But it's fictional, but there was like some like interesting points, and there's like this one part where Nietzsche actually starts, like, he was supposed to treat Nietzsche for his like despair, but then Nietzsche's kind of treating him for his his despair, kind of, or like he kind of feels like helpless because he's kind of just like going through life, and he feels like he's not like sure about like the choices that like he's kind of made. Like he has this like pull towards this like a patient of his towards this like other woman, but meanwhile he has his like wife and his kids. And there's like one part where you find out later that it's kind of, he's just kind of going through like this like hypnosis, but where he's like, okay, like that's it, like the only way for me to really choose this life, because, you know, it was like an arranged marriage and it like made sense at the time and like whatever, is for me to kind of, and like also like his practice, like being this like physician and whatever, is for me to leave, for me to like leave, and like maybe I'll choose it again, but maybe I won't, like, you know, I have to really have that choice. And so he kind of,
the bag of apples.
What's the bag of apples?
Descartes, where you dump out all your opinions and then you pick them back.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so he like leaves and he tells his wife, he's like, I'm going, and like, you know, like I never really chose, like this was never really like my choice, and I have to be able to leave and come back and like make this choice. And she's like, well, you can't just like, you chose to not choose. Like that was also part of your choice. Like you're like, this is like kind of, you're here now, and like this is your like duty. And he's like, well, he ends up leaving, and then he goes to like this other woman, and he sees that there's this other doctor taking care of her now, and she basically has the same relationship that he had with her. And so he's just like, he basically kind of recognizes that nobody really needs him. Like his family's okay, like at the end of the day, like he leaves them all this money. His wife, this other woman, is like, she doesn't really need him either, and his patients and practice, like he kind of left these other physicians, and then, but he kind of, he kind of comes back, and then he kind of like does choose his wife when he kind of wakes up from his like hypnosis. He's like, oh, he really does, you know, like this is what he really wanted, I guess. But I guess there's like, it also kind of dealt with like this, it kind of reminded me of the Matrix a little bit, where there's like this part of like looking for, it's like, do you want the truth, or do you kind of want to be like happy and like okay with like, you know, just like be content with like the way things are, and like not kind of search for like what's really going on, or like what things really mean. I feel like I kind of dealt with that as well, which I found interesting. Anyway. I forgot what what my whole point of that was.
It actually reminds me of an experience I actually had when I was in high school. I was in 12th grade, and my roommate was like a brilliant thinker, and he was like wondering like why he was in yeshiva. I was in like yeshiva high school, very religious, learning insane hours, you know, all day studying Talmud. My roommate and I would study Nach in the morning, like before prayers, you know. So basically, my day would start at like 6:30 a.m. and I would usually finish at like 1:32. Get like a solid, like, you know, 4 or 5 hours of sleep in there, maybe, if we weren't up like talking about the universe and the meanings of existence and all that stuff. And then we'd go again, and he was like, I just don't believe in this, you know. He had a whole different experience than I did, especially like childhood trauma and stuff like that. Like, his questions were based on a reality that I didn't have. In other words, imagine, you know, I act, you know, in a certain way. Let's say, imagine I'm a good person, right? And then, you know, everything works out for me. Or imagine I'm a bad person and I'm suffering. So you don't have that question of why do good people suffer. Generally, the question of why do good people suffer is really why do good people like me suffer, right? Right? Very often. I'm kidding, but like, you can look around at the world and find that theoretical question, but usually it's more of like why is this happening to me, right? Very often it's much more personal. Like, thankfully I had a great family. My parents are amazing, you know, like, I had a good upbringing. I had a lot of friends. Like, I went to a great school. My rabbis were amazing. Like, I never got in trouble for asking tough questions, you know. I had a very unique, like, upbringing out of town, you know, not in this, and like very, very unique. I didn't realize how unique it was till like I meditated on it like years later, you know, in my 20s. And he had a whole different upbringing. So, but he realized that what was holding him back from like being his true self, you know, was his relationships. Same thing. So he just cut me out of his life, like pretty much cold turkey. But again, it was very hard for him to do it because I wasn't on the same page as him. So he figured the way he'll get me on the same page as him is he'll make my life miserable. Okay. And then I won't even want to be his friend.
Not really following there.
Again, I was his best friend. I was his roommate.
Right.
I was his best friend, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he wasn't sure if he believed in the whole yeshiva thing, and the whole like religious Judaism thing, right? Okay. But the problem is he's stuck in this whole religious Judaism thing, right? And one of the things that's holding him in here is all his relationships.
Got it. So he thought he'd give
so
you a
let's
bad
burn all the relationships, and then I can decide whether or not I really want to be here.
Got it.
Right?
Got it.
Let's leave the wife and kids. Let's throw away the practice, and then I can decide whether this is the life I really want.
Wow.
So it wasn't years later till I started really meditating that like I just totally understood like what he was going through. Because again, when I started meditating, I had the same experience of like, of everyone is kind of stopping you on a certain level, consciously or not consciously, from being your true self. Like, there's a certain part of me right now that wants to stay in Judaism because, you know, my life and my friends and my family, like, they're all here. That's obviously true. I can't deny that, right? On a certain level, it's also obviously irrelevant because you should be able to think from where you're standing, because you're always standing somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So on a certain level, that has to work out, and that's one of the things for me. It was like the strongest idea of Judaism was that concept of like tinok shenishba, of like Judaism doesn't believe in converting other people. Like, we don't expect someone born into a different religion to come to ours. Whereas most people in every other religion expect you to accept their truth or you're going to go to hell. Right? Whereas Judaism's like, just be a moral person. Like, Shava Mitzvahs, B'nai Noach, like the Noahide laws. Like, just be a decent moral person and, like, you'll have your own heaven. I don't need you to be me,
Yeah. I wonder if there's, like, when you were talking about your friend before and yourself, like, kind of saying, like, how, you guys had, like, different experiences, but I wonder if there's, like, a part to it where, because it's always kind of bothered me, because some people attribute me, like, asking these questions or feeling this way or thinking to, like, an emotional part. But I kind of find that a little bit offensive, because I like to think that it's not emotional and that I'm, like, thinking, right? Like the reason why I have trouble with something is not because, like, I feel like I'm, like, it's whatever, or like I've had some sort of bad experience that therefore leads me, like, to think, like, oh, must be God doesn't exist, because if God did exist, he wouldn't do bad things to people, like, I feel like, but I think that a lot of people attribute sometimes, or they attribute that,
but it's also irrelevant
to having an emotional experience.
It's also
so I don't know.
Because this is like doing the math.
I didn't care. Yeah.
This is like doing the math. There could be 1,000 reasons why you reached this conclusion before you did the math, right?
Where it doesn't matter.
But now you got to show your work. So, like, one second. If somebody comes over and smacks me across the face, right? My go-to reaction is probably, this is not okay because it hurts, right? I probably register the pain and not okay before I think through, oh, was this justified, right? But then I stop and I'm like, what the hell was that for? Right?
Yeah.
So the fact that, like, oh, you're only saying that he shouldn't hit you because you experienced pain. It's like, no, he shouldn't hit me.
Yeah.
What? That was not justified. What? Now, had I liked him hitting me, I probably wouldn't have complained. So it's always like that. Like, on a certain level, like, yeah, it's only the issues that arise in our consciousness that cause us to... In other words, what are we thinking about? We're thinking about the things that we need to think about. The things we don't need to think about, generally we just don't think about because it's working. And we only have so much brain power, and we're trying to minimize and view the world as simply as possible in order to get through it and navigate. So the things that are working, we generally don't really think about. And it's only when it stops working where we're like, wait, what?
Right, so
but that doesn't mean that it makes sense now just because you're only thinking about it because it was a problem. That doesn't mean... Did I ever read you my poem on emotions?
Now you want to read it?
I never read it to you.
I don't think so.
You'll actually get it's called Emotion Turtles.
Okay.
You'll actually get the reference, I think. They say emotions make you want to leave, but deep down you want to stay. Yet that depth is all emotion too. Emotion turtles all the way.
I don't get the reference.
You don't get it? It's about what's the world on? The world is on a turtle. What's that turtle on? Or another turtle? You familiar with that?
Oh, I've definitely heard this before.
And then it's like
I heard it recently.
Turtles all the way down.
Can you read it again?
Yeah. But the idea, just the idea of, like, turtles all the way down, is also a John Green, like, novel. But conceptually, it's an expression of the problem of infinite regress. Of, like, oh, the world's on the back of a turtle, but what's that turtle on? Oh, he's back of another turtle, but what's that turtle on? The back of another turtle. Like, you never end. So if you want to play this game of, like, emotions, then it's all emotions. I only have a problem because it's not working for me, and you are only okay with it because it is working for you. Right? It's the same problem on the opposite. In other words, when this guy once came to me in Lakewood, and he's like, yo, you're only questioning God because deep down you want to do whatever you want to do, right? And I'm like, you're only not questioning. He's like, you want to justify the things you're doing, right? And I'm like, deep down, you're not questioning God because you want to justify the past 50 years of your life.
Yeah, it's true.
It's the same. It's irrelevant. But one more time, they say emotions make you want to leave, but deep down you want to stay. Right? In other words, it's the problem which make you want to leave, but really want to stay. But that depth is all emotion too. The idea of wanting to stay is only because you had this experience growing up. If you didn't have experience growing up with these, you wouldn't be here in the first place. Right? Emotion turtles all the way. We're going to deal with an infinite regress. Because you're never going to be able to find anything that's devoid of emotions. Everything is already linked with your experience. It's not that pain induces running. Rather, it asks us why we stand and let it ruin all we have without taking a stand. The pain isn't making you run. The pain is making you think. And now you thought, and you're like, what the hell's going on? Why am I here? I don't like being here.
Right. And I think that's something I have to remember often, because I do find it offensive when people tell me, they're like, maybe you're just being emotional or something. I don't know.
I was being emotional, and now I'm being intellectual.
Great.
Right? They say the pain has made you question. They say it's evil that sows doubt. I say that suffering inquires as to what it's all about. Right? Those in comfort need not question. If it's all good, then let it be. That's why they're not looking, and thus will never see. You don't need to think. Okay, so don't think.
But sometimes people experience pain and they only double their belief, or they question less in a way, or like I don't know.
That's an emotional response to an emotional trigger.
Right, I guess it's also
in a way.
Then it's just also all emotional.
You're going to deal with this infinite regress of like it's just all going to be emotions if you want to play that game, you know?
Wow, maybe we should all just go to therapy instead.
I mean, clearly, if you look around, clearly the people who are in a certain religion stay there, right? Generally, most of the time. People born in, okay. If that's not emotional, then what is that?
Yeah. No, that was actually something I was thinking about recently. I'm like, if people are just like comfortable where they stay or the way they grew up, and then they kind of just stay that way, then there's no like there's it's not like, oh, most people who like, whatever grow up a certain way then like convert to some other religion because that makes more sense to them. Like that's not really what happens. So I don't know. I was kind of thinking about it in terms of like what's really like the true way, but I guess the true way is really just the emotional way.
On a certain level, no. I mean, I think the true way. First of all, for me, the true way is totally irrelevant on a certain level of like religion and beliefs and all. In other words, there are good people in every religion, and there are assholes in every religion, right?
Right. It's separate from the people that.
It's really like, and for me, like the good people in every religion are all good people. But you got to judge them more on who they are as an individual, and not on which group they associate themselves with. That's so super irrelevant. And this, by the way, was one of the teachings of Jesus, right? It was the teaching of the Good Samaritan, and the Christians completely lost it because then they just went around massacring people from other groups, as if like, oh, you're part of that group? Oh, you're a horrible person. It's like, no, the whole idea of the good... Are you familiar with the Good Samaritan story?
Remind me, please.
The Good Samaritan story is you're walking along the way, and you see I'm paraphrasing right now. I'm not going to get the story perfect, but basically there's this poor, downtrodden man who's like, homeless, lying on the side of the road, tattered, in pain. And the rabbi comes. Walks down the block, and he sees this guy, and he's like, "It's not befitting of me to." He crosses the street, and he totally ignores the guy, and he keeps walking. And then the priest comes, the Kohen, and he doesn't want to become tamei or whatever, right? So he also, crosses the street or whatever, right? And then eventually the Samaritan comes. Now the Samaritan would be the equivalent nowadays of like the Jews referring to like the Arabs, or the Arabs referring to that group of like people who are like not, that like out group of the Samaritan sees this guy, and he crosses over the street, and he helps him up, and he brings him home, and he cleans his wounds, and he washes him, and he clothes him and feeds him, and like that's the one who God loves. That's the one who's beloved in the eyes of the Lord. Like it's who you are as an individual, not the group you associate yourself with, that makes you an exceptional person.
Yeah.
And we all lose that story. It's like, oh, are you like, what religion do you associate with? Like, what political party are you? No, it's who are you as an individual.
Right. And sometimes people also, I don't know, I feel like this is something I just realized a lot. I guess like in like politics or like not even just like people that are like leaders or whatever, where people sometimes also just forget, or sometimes like I feel like we put these people on like a pedestal, right? And we're like, we expect them to also only be like one way, and like they only do good things, like they never, like they can't do bad things, you know. Like, and then if they did do something bad, we somehow justify it, like no, like they had to do it like this, like there's no way around it. But I don't know, we sometimes like take like the humanity out of people and like just expect them to be like to like fit a certain bill or like be perfect.
I mean, there's also like conceptually, like even if, because I do believe this on a certain level, they're working on a whole different like level, but everyone can make a mistake.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying there aren't people who have, like, I do believe that there are people who have like cheshbonot, kind of, they're making calculations that I'm unaware of, they're beyond me, right? But like, it doesn't mean that everything they say is correct. Like, everyone in Judaism, everyone can be flawed, dude. They don't believe, like, Judaism is not the religion that believes in God in human form.
I feel like we believe everybody's right, not everybody's flawed. Like, whatever their rabbi said, like, it's all right. Even though they contradict, but like at the end of the day, it's all right.
Everyone, like Moses screwed up, you know?
Yeah.
And Moses was questioned multiple times. People complained to him, and the people questioned him, and, you know, they had a whole uprising. Korach tried overthrowing him. Like, this is not a simple... But he messed up. But my rabbi...
The thing
flawless,
is,
you know, freaking flawless, my rabbi. It's like a weird concept. Like, what?
Maybe it was just like my Chabad education, and like I don't know, but I feel like we would always learn like a sicha or something about like how what Moshe really did was like really the right, like actually like, oh, you think he did it wrong, but no, like he actually, it was right, or like, you know, like King David, like he sinned, but no, like really it was like actually like the right thing, like it was that. There was actually like he had right intentions. At least he had the right intentions.
Right intentions. I like doing that. I like doing that because again, I want to steel man everyone. I want to steel man everyone and everything. Right. I don't mind, and I want to judge everyone favorably. Yeah, he had right intentions, but so did Hitler. You know.
I don't know about that.
No, like I'm okay with. It doesn't bother me to say everyone has right intentions. I'm okay with pretending everyone's the hero of their own story. That's okay with me.
Okay, but some people actually have bad intentions, I think.
It doesn't in a way I don't think so. I think some people are I don't think, who has a bad intention? Go ahead.
Not me.
I think that some people are okay. Some people have a philosophy in which it's me, you know, uber alles, where like, you know, a huge ego where like I can totally run you over on the way to achieve my goal. But in a way, I don't have a bad intention. I have a good intention of helping myself at the cost and detriment of everyone else. I don't know if I would call that a bad intention. Maybe misguided. I don't know if I would call it a bad... I'm trying to help myself. Is that a bad intention? I want money and power and fame and whatever, and I'm willing to, you know, rob and kill and lie and to accomplish that. Is that a bad intention? No, I think it's just you're negating everyone else on your way to get what you want. In a way, that's almost a bad implementation. It's not a bad intention.
I guess so. I don't know, all people are just, I don't know, at the end of the day, right, like nobody else is looking out for you, you kind of have to look out for yourself, but...
I agree with that, but the question is how you define self. That's the question.
I don't know.
For me, that's why the spiritual experience is so important. You know, the Eastern tradition for a Western man is because it just, you have a different perception of self versus other. Like, these two cease to exist.
Interesting. I am not very familiar. I don't know if I've experienced this. But you know what? Now that you mentioned it, I wonder if...
Ego death is what they call it in the drug world or the meditation world.
Yeah, so here's the thing. How do you differentiate between that and then, like, we started talking about before, but I don't know if you really got to it. Like, this, like, you know, that novel, or I think it was a novel, but based off a true story, like, The Wave, right? Where it's like, or Hitler, I don't know, like, people were like, they kind of, that, like, mob mentality where you kind of just become one with the whole because you're not
The
really an
tribalism.
individual, I guess. Yeah, so, like, how do you differentiate what you're advocating for versus that? I don't know, it seems the same to me.
I'm advocating. One second. For me, I'm not talking about in thought or in practice. I'm talking about in essence, on a certain
Just
level.
like soul, like on a soul level.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, like that idea of like we're all part of the big picture. We're all in this together, right? And that at the end, it'll be better for everyone if we play nicely. And if you have a certain level of like empathy, then yes, you can dominate the whole system, but then you're making everyone else suffer. Is that what you want? There are some people who are okay with that, and there are some people who that's not what they want. I don't want to win at your expense. Look at like imagine like a grandfather versus like a father versus like a child or something. So like, let's say there's like two children, right? Playing together. They're each trying to win, right? Now, the father will very often, win sometimes. He'll let his kid win sometimes. You want to keep the game going. You want it to be exciting. The father also understands if you win all the time, then the game becomes stupid. The kid doesn't want to play anymore. Kids don't understand that. Part of the game is winning. Part of the game is losing. The father that's on a certain level spiritual enlightenment of like, part of the game is winning sometimes, losing sometimes. Like that just keeps it fun, right? The grandfather is often the other extreme where it's like he'll always lose. He doesn't care. He has no ego. I don't need to win this game. I know who I am. You're a freaking 5-year-old. Let the 5-year-old win. Let him have fun. Let him feel like he's the guy.
Yeah.
So
Is
there
that
are people
really
in life who
beneficial
go through
for
life.
the 5-year-old though?
Probably not. The grandfather is not meant to raise the children. When grandparents raise kids, it's not good because you shouldn't be giving them everything they want. They need a certain level of adversity. We need to balance it out. You have to understand you don't always win. You don't always get what you want. But on a certain level, that's the grandfather's role. And Kabbalah, that's like the equivalent of like, they have like Atik Yomin, like Abba, right? Ima, like these are these concepts that they stand for these ideas. Like there's a level of God in which God is a pure giver, and there's a level of God in which, is universe. There's a level of the universe in which it just wants to give. There's a level of the universe where it understands that like if we just give, then if the universe, then it's not a game. And you don't get tough. You're just gonna get weaker. Sometimes we give, sometimes we take, sometimes we put you in tough situations because we want you to grow. Right? And then there's a level of people who are just take. I just want for me. And it's just a different state of consciousness. It's a different understanding of reality. And I think we're all on a certain level like that as when we're younger. A lot of people, not everyone. You meet people who are like very unique. You see kids sometimes who like, who aren't like that. You see kids who they'll take a different kid's toy, and if the kid is crying and yelling and screaming, they don't care. Mine. I got the toy, I won. Then you see kids who will take a toy and the kid will start yelling and screaming and crying, they'll give the toy back. Because the yelling and screaming and crying makes them feel worse about themselves than having the toy. So really it's all selfish.
Right.
It's all selfish. Right?
I think so.
But I feel better when you're happy than I do when I get what I want.
Yeah.
So on a certain level, the question is, how do you expand that feeling of empathy? How do you expand that feeling of self? Of like, we're in this together. Like, if you're crying, then I'm not. It bothers me too.
Yeah.
Right. And on a certain level, that's why the whole idea of having children, the consciousness that you gain from having children, Kabbalistic, like whatever, is supposed to, on a certain level, be this understanding.
Maybe I'm taking this
Supposed to really feel
too literally. It just sounds very like, I don't know, like codependent, like a codependent relationship with everything else.
What? How so?
Like where, not that I don't think people should feel like a certain sense of responsibility for other people. I really think they should. I like to think that I do. But then there's a part where it can be like detrimental kind of to your own self, or your own like where you attempt to control things that are not really that are kind of beyond your control, because you feel this like responsibility for people that you're not necessarily really responsible for.
Well, first of all, in my scenario I was talking about taking something away from them, right?
Right.
More
okay, then like
in
giving.
just that scenario, more in a way, more so than giving. But again, the idea should be part of not having that codependency is like that father mentality of like, you need to toughen up, like you need to be able to do this on your own. I'm not always going to be here for you. A good parent, in my opinion, on a certain level, good father, and the mother wants to smother the child on a certain level, and the father wants to take his distance, right? But like on a healthy level, you give your child as much individuality or as much space as they can handle, and you keep pushing that boundary, I think.
Yeah. It's
of like, if you could,
it's that it goes back just to that book that I was reading, where there's this one scene with Nietzsche and Brouwer, and they're at this like the cemetery visiting Brouwer's parents, and he says something about, I think it's in the scene at least, where Brouwer's mother died young, but then Nietzsche says that his father died when he was young, and I think maybe he like attributes maybe some of his, I don't know, problems to that. But he's like, I'm actually happy that my father died young, because otherwise I would have been like, I would have kind of been like directed to like, you know, pursue a certain way in life, or like have been a certain way, but because my dad died young, I was able to just, you know, be myself kind of thing. That's essentially what he was kind of saying. I don't know. I feel like, I guess it's like a similar-ish idea in a way. I don't know. Not exactly, but just like
it's a greater understanding of how something that could have been perceived negatively also helped shape you into, you know, like the good and the bad, like they come together, like.
And also that need for... It
was a bad thing your father died young, but it also made you who you are. Like, it's you can't really separate these things. You don't get to, you know...
Yeah, no, and really what I think I was trying to get at was, like, the need for... sometimes the need that like, to kind of, like, take that step back and, like, really allow your child to individuate, because otherwise... I mean, I'm talking as if I know and I have experience parenting. I have no idea.
Yeah, but I think it's also, this is like the deeper concept of the good and the bad together becoming one, fusing. Because on a certain level, we often view them separately. And it's like, oh my God, my dad died. But if you understand that's part of the greater picture and that also made you who you are, you don't get to separate those two. Mm. Then it doesn't... I had this interesting conversation a couple weeks ago. I went to a friend of mine for Shabbat. And they were discussing at some point like whether or not I wanted to be there, because he knew like someone else had invited me as well, right? And they kind of felt bad that I'd been missing out on, like, the other one was like, you know, more of like a party, like whatever the experience was. And I said I obviously chose this one because I'd rather spend time with you. Now, yes, by spending time with you I'm missing the party, but by going to the party I'm missing spending time with you. Right. So if you view them as full choices, in other words, there's a choice. Either I get a party without my friend, or I get my friend without a party. Why would I go to my friend and then say, I wish I also got the party? Or why would I go to the party and then say, I wish I also got my friend? That's not a reality. That's not a choice. Right? And sometimes people view it like that, and they're like, oh my God, I'm missing out on the party. Like, if I was at the party, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm missing out on hanging out with my friend. Like, you're always going to run into a problem with that mode of thinking, because it just doesn't work like that. You could be like, oh my God, I wish, you know, I still had my father, and then you had your father be like, oh my God, I wish I could do whatever I want. You don't get both.
Well, in that case, you have a little bit of a different.
On a certain, you know what I mean?
It's a little different, I think, in your case, because it's like you had the choice.
But when you understand it like that on a certain level, you can. This is like the the Eastern way of understanding reality, is that reality is just this beautiful whole of like, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and we need that all. It's all part of the big picture.
Well, here's my question.
And it's from a lower.
The same way, because it sounds really nice and beautiful. So I'm just wondering, like, the same way that, like, from the outside, like, Judaism can sound really nice and beautiful, and it is to a certain extent. Does Eastern religion have that aspect as well? Is there like?
But I want to take away religion, by the way, and just say like this Eastern like mode of thought, okay. More like mode of understanding. Like this is like more of a Kabbalistic, also meditative. It's like a.
Okay.
Like Rabbi Kaplan likes pointing out that Judaism is an Eastern religion that migrated to the West.
Interesting.
But like conceptually in Judaism, they have the same thing also. Like in the ideas in the times of Mashiach, we're not going to say Baruch Dayan HaEmet. We're going to say Baruch HaTov HaMetiv. I don't know if you're like familiar with that
Baruch
teaching.
HaTov?
There's an idea in Judaism right now when somebody dies, we say Baruch Dayan HaEmet, like blessed is the true judge. Like what happened is horrible and it doesn't make any sense to me, and like it is what it is. Like I'm God's, right? But then the theory is like in Messianic times we're going to say Baruch HaTov HaMetiv. We're going to like praise God for all His goodness, because we're just not going to perceive it as like a bad detriment. It's going to be part of life is also death. Like it's just going to be this weird.
Everything's good.
Like meditative, like all is good, all is like big picture, all like
very hippie-ish.
All is like hippie. Like yeah, but at the end of the day, like we're not living in that reality, and we're probably not supposed to be like. We're not necessarily supposed to be living in that reality, because we want to have things that are not okay. That way we can also fight them in a way. Like,
right. Because if
you don't want to accept the suffering in the world, it's not our job to do. It's our job to try to ease the suffering.
Like if we think cancer is good, then we'll probably never actually cure it. Right.
Right.
So.
And I think that's only a point for Messianic times, because in Messianic times, we will have gotten rid of suffering to a large extent.
How do you define Messianic
That's the idea.
times?
Like we'll be. I don't know.
Just as after 7,000 years, or 6,000.
There you go.
Something.
Great. So it's a state of consciousness, I think, on a certain level. Yeah. But yeah, it's the idea of like doing your best, and then after you did your best, then you can accept the things you cannot change, right? But first you have to change all the things. First you need the courage to change all the things you can, right?
Yeah, and then accept the things you cannot.
And then you can accept all the things that you cannot. Right. So like, shouldn't get ahead of the game over here. We shouldn't be accepting the things before we try to change them all. So like the idea, my understanding kind of like that Messianic thing is like, we change like as much as we can. Like people are no longer, dying from calamities. They're dying from old age. You know what I mean? Right. Whatever. And like we've pushed it to the limits of like we're living as long as we can. And if that were the truth, like if we honestly believed that we were all doing our best and living as long as we can and everything, and then we're just going because that was the way of the world, like on a certain level, you don't have the same experience when somebody dies at 100 years old, and when there's a it's not the same at all.
Right.
And in a way, I think we can push it to a certain extent. And once we reach that extent, then we can accept everything else, kind of, maybe. In theory, I don't know. Something to that effect. But this Eastern way of looking at it is more just accepting it as a whole, as it is.
Yeah. Like kind of just. Is it kind of just like understanding, like all parts of the system, or is it not even understanding it, but like kind of just being in it?
I think it's like to a certain extent like realizing it's all the system, not separating it. Like in Kabbalah they say a lot of problems come from like the disharmony, like the lack of like the unity. Like when you break them up into like separate pieces, then we have problems here. But when it's all like one big whole, in the big picture, So we might be more okay, you know? Like, think of it like as humanity. On a certain level right now, we can, you know, get up and say, like, something's going on, whatever's going on in Ukraine or this, right? Whatever it is, or it could be something in a political sphere, and you could be like, this is not okay, and you go out, you pick it, and you riot, you this, you that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, I'm not saying you can't help make change. But again, if you zoom out and you look at, like, racism in America, it clearly has been getting a lot better. It's not like, you know, to say, like, oh, we're still where we are in the early 1900s, 18, like, that's ridiculous. Like, to call Putin and Ukraine, like, for anyone to employ the word Nazi in that conversation doesn't belong there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not yet.
Like, in the big picture, we're clearly making strides forward. Like, you can acknowledge that, and if you acknowledge that, then it's all good. But at the same time, don't let that interfere with making making it better than it is today. Yes, it's been, as a society as a whole, it's been getting better, but you shouldn't sit back on your ass and be like, okay, whatever, it's been getting better. Right? We can make it even better. I agree with that. Right?
Yeah.
But don't let the small problems today make you lose sight of the big picture of, like, it's good, it's getting better, like, we're gonna be okay. You know what I mean? Don't get stuck in this, like, you know, like AOC, like, in 10 years the whole world is ending because of climate change. I think she said 12, actually. Like, are you crazy? In 12 years think the whole world's gonna collapse because of climate change? Sounds ridiculous to me.
I don't like the world.
It's just, you're crazy. You hyper focused in on one little aspect of something, and, like, you're like so hyper focused. You have tunnel vision, in my opinion. And now the whole world's a horrible place because no one's focusing on your problem, because this is the most important thing, and everyone has to focus on this. And it's like, okay, relax, take a couple deep breaths, right?
Yeah, I guess it's just like can we just all live in, like, peace, happiness, harmony? I feel like that's my perception of of, like, Eastern thought. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, a lot of it's not. A lot of it's really intense. A lot of it is accepting a lot of your own suffering, accepting your place. Like, in Eastern thought, to a large extent, like, you accept where you are, and that ends the suffering.
So
like, we could say about the person in your story that he just accepted the fact this is the wife he's married to, and these are his children, and this is his practice, and, like, Zahu, this is his life, then he wouldn't have to leave.
Right.
But he wasn't willing to really accept that, and that accepting that really, you know, can take a lot of work and meditation and understanding of, like, you know, where you're at. In other words, in theory, he could have meditated on all that before he even left.
I should have meditated.
And he could have just stayed.
If only he meditated.
I think that's part of, like, the enlightenment is, like, whatever, yeah. Doesn't matter if I'm here, if I'm there, this is where I am, and let's just make the most of it. Live with this.
Yeah. Do you think, like, just, like, going back to that, like, where there's this idea where, like, essentially, okay, like, let's say those, where you were talking before about the rabbi that kind of, like, criticized you, was like, oh, you know, you're just doing this because, right, you know? Anyway, and, like, and then, remind me what your response was again? It was a good one.
He's like, you're only doing this to you only are questioning God to justify the things you're doing. And I said, you're only not questioning God to justify the last 50 years of your life. Right.
So, in a way, so, like, in that, the story of the book that I was reading also, like, where where the woman his wife tells him that, you know, you kind of chose not to choose. Do you think, in a way, that, let's say that your rabbi also, or I don't know if he's your rabbi, but that the rabbi was also kind of choosing not to choose, or maybe he really just chose, it. But can you really choose it? You know when people talk about free will, at least the way I was always taught it, right? Like, in school, it was like, oh, you know, if you're given, like, the option of, like, if you're giving a kid, like a 2-year-old kid, like the option of like a lollipop or like $10, like it's not really a choice because they don't really have the understanding of what the $10 mean. They only understand what the lollipop means, right? So it's not, you're not giving them an equal choice.
Depends how you define choice.
So right, so that's
You're
what
not
I'm
giving
like.
them an equal choice. I don't know. I mean, choices are not supposed to be equal. If they were equal, we wouldn't be able to choose. You're not giving them a informed choice, a fully informed choice. That's how I would
Right. So
word
can
it.
you really choose? Is your choice really meaningful unless it's a fully informed choice?
But again, just because you're not giving them a fully informed choice doesn't mean they didn't choose. The kid still chose the lollipop. No? What do you call it? The kid didn't
They
choose
did.
the lollipop. The kid chose the lollipop.
They did, but it's not. Oh, it's not considered free will, right? Because like the kid.
Right.
didn't
That's
really-
different. That's a different question. Is it considered free will? How do you define that? Like, in other words, your choice is
Free will
dependent on a
confuses me.
lack of knowledge, and if you had more knowledge, you would make a different choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Whoa.
Agreed. So if
That's a
this
scary
rabbi had more knowledge, if he had more of an open mind,
Or more of an emotional experience, maybe also, or a different emotional experience.
different emotional experience, then he would be looking at it completely differently, right?
Yeah. Like if this kid, if the 2-year-old kid one time had like a lollipop that was like poisoned or something, and it, you know, I don't know, gave him bad
Correct.
effects, then he probably wouldn't choose a lollipop. If that's not an emotional
Correct.
experience, I don't know. What was that?
It's an experience. They can
An
call it
experience.
emotional or intellectual or whatever. If they had a bad experience with lollipops, then yeah, that happens a lot. And then you end up doubling, tripling down, and it gets really messy over the course of our lives. On a certain level. In other words, there are people, they had a bad relationship, let's say, bad father figure, bad neglect, abuse, whatever, and then it just makes it hard for you to ever have relationships.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you do have relationships, very often you have that same kind of unhealthy relationship because that's what you always used to.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And
Have
then
you
it just
ever
becomes like a vicious cycle.
Have you heard that before? Like, I think maybe I take it a little too literally, but like this idea that like your relationship with God is kind of like a projection of your relationship with your father.
I don't know if I've ever actually heard that, but I definitely, but yeah, I would believe in that on a certain, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's interesting.
On a certain level, until you are able to, meditate and get past the anthropomorphism, like,
Oh, maybe that's the
possible to
problem.
get past
Just like anthropomorphizing it. Yeah.
yeah, but this question of choice and free will, like, to me, on a certain level, it's also irrelevant. Like, what was that question for? Like, this guy, let's say, who was trying to justify the last 50 years of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that if he had a different scenario, different background, different this, like, he would be more accepting, he would understand everything differently, like 1,000%. But now what? Like, what's the point? Like, I don't, like, what's your...
I guess just.
I don't necessarily really believe in free will either, and I because of that, like, I often don't really get mad at people. They're just I can't have a conversation with you. Like, you're not, okay. The only reason why you talk out of your ass is because you had a traumatic childhood experience. Good. Now come back to me when you can talk intellectually, like when you can be intelligent.
Yeah, I guess just that like the. I guess that like, okay, I guess that's really what it comes down to. That there's like no, like, did you really like have that choice? And like, I guess I was trying to get what I think I was trying to get at.
No, and I didn't have that choice either.
Right.
I don't think that I know the things I know because I really had a choice. Maybe I might have had again, I mean, first of all, free will, by the way, in Judaism is also a debate.
Yeah.
Like, there are Rishonim, like, there are Jewish scholars from hundreds of years ago do not believe in free will.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Just FYI.
Okay, that's
Okay.
good to know.
I think Rabbeinu Krashkas is one of them. He doesn't really believe in free will. He believes that the only level of free will we have kind of is to understand, is to like analyze, but not like we're doing whatever we're doing, and then the question is like, do we like pay attention to it, or do we analyze it, or how do we take it, like how do we think about it? I guess like you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do. The question is like afterwards, like, are you gonna feel bad about it or not? I don't even understand what he's saying, to be honest. I'm not even gonna get into it. but
Yeah.
on a certain level, I don't think I am who I am just because of all these, like like a fluke. I was born into this society at a certain time with certain parents, with certain siblings, and like that created me on a certain level. I believe in nurture by far more than I believe in nature, and like I said, I had a very interesting upbringing where like my dad is a very respected figure in the community, and my dad also happens to be a very like emotionally like sound, put together, like very sweet person. Like at every like family event, like we hand him a box of tissues before he gets up to speak, um,
Mhm.
which is unique. That's not a normal, not a normal experience. And I grew up out of town, and because my dad was so well respected, I got away with anything that I was able to justify. Like if I like at one point I wrote this like ridiculous essay. I had like done something, I got in trouble for it. I had to write like a 4-page essay. I wrote this 4-page essay like explaining logically like how I had reached that conclusion and how really I was justified, and if my teachers really thought what I did was wrong, then they would have never done X, Y, and Z. And like it was just 4 pages of logic as to why like no one else knew what they were talking about except for me, and I got away with it. And anywhere else in the world, I would have been expelled from school in like a heartbeat. But like I grew up out of town, and there's no other Jewish schools to go to, and like everything I said was actually very intelligent. And at the end of the day, the principal at the time still asks my mom how I'm doing because he was like stunned by the logic.
He's wondering where all the logic got you.
but anywhere else, it got me here, podcast with you, right?
Good logic.
But like anywhere else, that never would have flown. Like if I had grown up anywhere else, I would have been in like my 10th school by the time I, reached high school.
Yeah.
Or I would have kept my mouth shut and stopped thinking and just started accepting what I perceived to be wrong as must be right, and I don't know what I'm talking about. And I would have had to squash my own voice because I would have suffered from speaking out. And I grew up in an environment where I didn't have to squash my own voice. And that gave me the courage of speaking out.
Yeah.
And the more you speak, the more you individuate on a certain level. Yeah, the more.
No, I guess it's not really about. I guess the question, because my original question was, is choosing not to choose really? Are you also choosing? But then I guess really the question is, it's not really about choosing not to choose. It's more about like choosing not to think or choosing to think things through. I think that's really what it comes down to. But
choosing not to choose.
Because
I mean, on a certain level, you're going to hit infinite regress.
Right.
Are you choosing to choose not to choose?
I just read this article the other day from the Wall Street Journal about, I don't know, about, it was a response to this other article about, I don't know if it was an article or not that or whatever, about this like about getting married. I think it was like getting married young as long as you don't like live together. It like, I don't know, it's statistically proven to like, you'll probably last longer in your marriage, And then this article was
I don't know
kind
what
of
that
like
means, but also that some of these articles don't take into effect like whether or not you have a healthy marriage. But yeah, keep going.
Right. It's yeah. You just be like take these statistics into account. Just be like, okay, I'm just gonna live my life like that. Like there's a little more to it, right? But then there was a response to it about a person's individual experience where she was like got married in an arranged marriage when she was 23, and she's like, I think the reason why it worked kind of was because there was no, she was like, it wasn't so much about the choice, it was more about now it was just about kind of being like the commitment. Now, like separate from choice, there was just now the commitment and the duty kind of. So now she was just like, okay, so like, there was no choice in the first place, so therefore there's no choice to reconsider also, I guess, is what she was trying to get at. I'm not really sure. But I guess, like, even for choosing not to...
It depends what you develop. Again, if you want it to work and you want to develop something, you can. If you don't, then it won't. Like, I think we can all agree that if you don't want to marry someone and I force you, it'll never work.
Right, so she was in a way, like, she wasn't choosing not to choose. She was just choosing... She was really just choosing.
To try to make it work.
Okay.
It can work. I had a weird phenomenon when I started meditating and I was trying to like understand people and perception and choices and all that stuff. When, without going into detail, I explained to my parents why they ended up choosing each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I argued that there was really no choice. It was like a deep meditation on like how our decisions are made and where our choices come from and whether or not you're conscious of it. And my parents were completely not conscious of it, and because of that, like, you know, there's the game that happens, you know, and they ended up getting married, and they just looked at me like I was crazy, you know, because I was crazy. Like, you're on a certain level, I was right. Not on a certain level, I was right, you know, but it's irrelevant. Now they're together, they lived a beautiful life together, they're happily married, they have a bunch of children. Like, who cares how we met? Yeah, we were forced into this marriage, you know, because again, even the person who thinks they chose to marry, very often they didn't choose either. You ever watch The Beautiful Mind?
Not yet, but it's on my list of things to watch.
So the epiphany that he has in the bar is he basically crunches mathematically the equation for attraction.
Okay.
The reality is, if you understood me right now, you would know exactly who I'll be attracted to and who I won't. And you could tell them what to say. It's the idea of like dating coaches and stuff like that. Like, I can manipulate your attraction. Right? You definitely can manipulate people's attraction, and in a way, girls do it all the time when they put on makeup. Right? Some people have makeup on their face, and some people have makeup on their personality. Right? Right? And some people have makeup on their words. You're watching what you're saying, but in theory, if you're very conscious of everything that's going on in the other person, you can always, this idea of a pickup artist, it works. There are books on the psychology of it. Like, it works. And then you could ask a question: did you choose to sleep with me? If I'm a pickup artist and I picked you up, if you didn't choose to sleep with me, did I just rape you? Like, how does that, like? This is like very intense, like very like philosophically, like these are very complicated. Did you choose? Like, yeah, you chose, but I manipulated that choice. Now, as long as I didn't manipulate that choice on any false pretenses, right, then maybe it's not such an issue. What if it was a false pretense? I remember reading an article once about this guy who woke up in the morning after his wedding, and his wife looked horrible, and he wanted to claim that the whole thing should be called off because she was wearing makeup until now, and now he woke up next to her not wearing makeup, and he felt like, total scandal, total scam. It's funny, but
actually,
like, to think about that.
Yeah.
It's funny, but to think about that, it's actually more complicated than, imagine you marry someone because you think they're religious, or you think they're not religious, you think they are religious, and then you get married and you realize they're not religious, and the next morning you're like, what?
Right.
They were just playing because, you're living in that society, and this happens all the time, and he thought she was religious, she thought he was religious. Sometimes they find out neither of them are religious, and it's perfect. Right?
Oh, God. Sounds so messy.
But it's risky, and it's scary, and it gets this idea of choice is just, it's a rabbit hole that I can't really go down. It's just too deep, you know.
I think,
but on a certain level, I think it's irrelevant.
It sounds like free will just doesn't exist.
but it's irrelevant. I mean, Alan Watts, I think, has had the term, like, you have free will to the extent that you know who you are, and I like that.
Uh-huh.
In other words, you don't really have free will necessarily, but your choice keeps changing the more you know. Right?
Yeah.
So
I feel like it's similar to what you were saying, the other rabbit, the rabbi you were talking about before, Rabbi something with an N. I think it was with an N. Reframing.
Oh, Rabbeinu Krashka? What?
Yeah.
No, because he's not.
Okay.
Yeah, but this concept would be more like, if you look at it, stop looking at it for a second as far as how much do I know about the $10 bill and how much do I know about the lollipop, and then start thinking of it, how much do I know about myself? What do I want? Right? Fine. So let's go back to like the shidduch idea, like the marriage idea, right? Okay, so in theory, the perfect girl out there for me is dependent on who I am. I might not know who I am, or I might not be honest with who I am. So I might be pretending I'm somebody I'm not, and in which case I might end up with a girl who meets that pretend me, and then the next morning we wake up and the makeup's off, and now it's like, what the hell is this, right? Again, it has a lot to do with me not really knowing who I am on a certain level. Now, if you know who you are, then you can manifest that into reality, and then you can try to find someone who's to meet you who you are. So on a certain level, to the extent that you know who you are, you now have that choice.
Yeah, but
Now, you don't have that choice in the sense of it's an actual choice. Again, it's not a choice either. In other words,
oh,
I might
Yeah,
think
but okay.
I might think I'm only attracted to, I'm only attracted to, Jewish Beis Yaakov girls, right? Because that's my whole life who I was supposed to be attracted to, and you see very often that yeshiva guys have a certain attraction more to Beis Yaakov girls because that's like their world, that's their circle, that's what they perceive to be like for them,
Sure.
and that creates this sort of sexual tension. Whereas someone who's beyond your group, like they're not nothing, no connection who you are. On a certain level, that there's also the lack of that choice, lack of that connection. Now, obviously, that's not really a choice because it's an attraction. What I'm saying is there by default. But to the extent you realize I'm not a yeshiva guy, these girls are not for me, right? That attraction will fall away, and you'll be attracted to a more spiritual, deeper, like whatever girl who's doing her own thing. She's right to a certain
Like
extent,
whatever.
and then.
It's really about how you define
And then-
yourself. The
Yeah,
problem,
to a large
the
extent.
problem is that, like you were saying before, a large part of yourself is defined by your nurture. I think, right? Like by your environment,
By others.
the outside. Yeah, not even like what is really yourself. I don't know, nothing really. I think.
I refer you
Like,
back to meditation.
I haven't meditated in a long time. I kind of gave up on it for a bit. One day we'll get
I
back
can't
to
answer
it.
that question as
Yeah.
to what is really yourself, but I do believe that people can find their own answers to a certain extent. I also believe, by the way, just agav, I also believe when you find that answer, the whole yeshiva seminary, that whole dichotomy will cease to exist. Because you'll find the answer as an individual, and the reality is that individual you're looking for might be wearing a hat and jacket, they might be wearing a blazer and whatever, they might be wearing, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, what they're wearing is irrelevant to who they are as an individual.
Right. Yeah.
Like, with the institution that they're in is irrelevant to who they are as an individual.
Right.
But you have to find that the same way the institutions you went through are irrelevant as to who you are as an individual.
Well, are they really? Because they
You-
definitely shaped a part of me.
Correct, but to who you are as an individual, deep down, whoever the hell that is, when you find that whoever it is, that whoever it is lives beyond your is way beyond your institutions. In theory, right? The whole idea would be trying to find who you are irrelevant of your institutions. Wouldn't that be the name of the game? The name of the game is finding the real you that wasn't defined by others. Once you find the real you that wasn't defined by others, you can try to see the real others within themselves that wasn't defined by them, by their others. Does that make sense? Once I acknowledge the fact that you are someone deep down irrelevant of all the bullshit that people gave you, some of it might be beautiful, by the way. I'm not saying
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's all bullshit. It might be amazing. But once I acknowledge the fact that there's a real you deep down inside, right? Then on a certain level, like, your background and your institution will probably cease to really bother me, and I can only acknowledge as a deep you deep down inside if I find the deep me deep down inside.
Okay, but my question is once you take away all that outside part and you just find yourself, why is myself any different than yourself? We're really all the same then at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's the
point.
unity.
Okay.
That's Shema Yisrael.
Yay.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Go us. It's really just all the same.
That's tefillin for guys, right?
Anyway, I have to get to work in a couple minutes. So,
Time flies and you're having fun.
yeah, good talk.